Chapter 876. Be careful, Your Majesty. There are strange fish in this river, Renbachian shouted at the Empress. It wasn't just this river. There were many strange fish in all the rivers in Dayo. Giant crocodiles were one of the more common ones, and there were many others with strange appearances. For example, this river. Before Renbachian could finish his sentence, more than a dozen black snake-like creatures shot out of the river like arrows. These creatures were about the length of a forearm, and as thick as 2 fingers. They had mouths full of fangs, and their jaws could reach 180 degrees like a snake's. The Empress didn't even look at them. She waved her hand in the air, and those creatures exploded in the air, spraying red blood everywhere. The next scene could make someone with trypophobia faint. Hundreds of similar creatures shot out of the river and fought for the flesh in the air. There were also countless blackheads on the surface of the water. They were so densely packed that it gave people goosebumps. The Empress's face turned cold. She waved her hand in the air, and the hundreds of creatures in the air turned into a rain of blood. The river surface sank, and the creatures in the water exploded one after another. The entire river was dyed red. The river was quiet for a few minutes. Then countless strange black fish appeared in the water, and frantically devoured the flesh of their own kind. Your Majesty, it's dangerous. Renbachian pulled the Empress's arm. What's the danger? The Empress didn't care, but she still frowned and asked, why are there so many of them? Renbachian forcefully pulled the Empress's arm back. He grabbed her waist and pulled her back. He hugged her thighs and pulled her back. It felt like he was pulling a metal pillar. It didn't budge at all. What are you doing? The Empress turned her head, put her hands under Renbachian's armpits, and then lifted him up. High up, a graceful lady in red with her hands under her armpits was lifting a man who weighed more than 100 kilograms. To outsiders, this scene didn't seem out of place. I'm trying to see if I can move you. In fact, it's too dangerous here, and I want to pull you back a little. Renbachian opened his arms and mimicked the action on the Titanic. Then, he was thrown to the ground by the Empress. What danger? The Empress scoffed. The danger doesn't come from those strange fish. It comes from those parasites on their bodies. Renbachian came up and put his hand into her clothes. Pa! The Empress unceremoniously made a pig's trotter. Your Majesty, can you check if there's anything extra on your body? Renbachian retracted his hand. The Empress was slightly taken aback. It's a small thing that's as thin as a cow's hair. It has an extremely fast ejection speed. Usually, they parasitized on the surface of the strange fish. When the strange fish jumped out of the water, they would also follow and shoot toward the target. If one didn't know, it would be easy to fall for it. These things will become bigger after sucking the blood of living creatures. At the same time, they can inject a small amount of poison to cause hallucinations. Then, they will fall into the river and be eaten by those strange fishes. Moreover, they can even bite a hole in ironware. Although His Majesty's body is tough, we still have to guard against it. Upon hearing Renbachian's words, the Empress's expression changed slightly. As long as one was a woman, they would have an instinctive disgust towards insects, especially these creatures that crawled on their bodies and sucked their blood. The Empress squinted her eyes and sensed carefully, following which, her facial expression turned ugly. He actually had it on him. This made the Empress feel disgusted as if she had eaten a fly. This thing could actually penetrate the force of her palm and land on her body. Furthermore, it could even hide from her. If it wasn't for Renbachian's reminder, she probably wouldn't have been able to discover those subtle incongruities. In the next second, the force exploded from the surface of the Empress's body. The Empress controlled the force on the surface of her body, and ordinary creatures would be shocked to death. However, the creatures that the Empress sensed still hadn't disappeared. The Empress's face turned green, and her body emitted a crackling sound. This wasn't the sound of her bones, but the sound of the air on the surface of her body. A strong wind swept around the Empress, and the lawn under her feet was instantly turned into debris. Subsequently, it was ground into extremely fine dust by the wind. However, the incongruities on the surface of the Empress's body didn't move at all. This time, the Empress started to feel a little scared. Your Majesty, although these things are extremely weak and can be crushed to death with one finger, they aren't afraid of force. Rinpoche said at this moment. The Empress glared at him. Rinpoche spread his hands and expressed his helplessness. In fact, he had been watching the show from the side for a long time. However, these things weren't very dangerous. If it was just one person, it would be somewhat dangerous as they would easily fall into the water after experiencing hallucinations. However, if it was two people, as long as one of them was awake, there wouldn't be any danger. Furthermore, after sucking blood, these things could at most grow to the size of a pinky finger and would automatically fall off. The Empress grabbed Rinpoche and ran into the distance, leaving behind only a sentence. Everyone wait here. If anyone dares to follow us, kill without mercy. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress had run more than 15 kilometers with Rinpoche before finding a forest to stop. The Empress turned her body, and her red muslin and white undergarments fluttered in the air. Capture them for me. The Empress had goosebumps all over her body. After having so many bugs on her body for so long, no one could accept it. Rinpoche saw the Empress's body in front of him. From head to toe, she was perfect and full of temptation. He subconsciously felt a wave of fire rising in him. He suppressed the fire in his heart and carefully looked at the places that the Empress had pointed at. There were only a few thin lines that were as thick as a cow's hair, which meant that these things hadn't broken through the surface of the Empress's skin. One had to know that these things could even drill through iron. Rinpoche stretched out his hand and crushed the thin lines. With a flick, they fell off. The heads of these things were relatively hard and weren't afraid of qigong, but their bodies were extremely fragile. A total of 7 bugs were taken off by Rinpoche, and the Empress heaved a sigh of relief. She was then hugged by Rinpoche and said, "It seems that there are still some that I haven't found. I have to look carefully. Has your waist recovered?" The Empress's voice was full of provocation. "This is a rare opportunity." Rinpoche laughed. They were usually in the palace, but this feeling was completely different. This was a rare opportunity. They're still waiting. Let them continue to wait. Not long after, the two of them rolled on the ground. Whether it was rocks or trees, as long as they were hit, they would be smashed into pieces. The ground was left with large traces of being run over by a road roller. Half a day later, Tongjinya stood there and looked in the direction that the Empress had disappeared. His face gradually began to turn black. They hadn't returned after so long. After another half a day, Tongjinya finally knew that they wouldn't be able to wait for them today. According to past practice, they probably wouldn't be able to wait for them tomorrow or the day after, should he go back or not. "What should we do, Minister?" An official from the Ministry of Works came up and asked. "Wait." Tongjinya added. "Wait here. I'll go back to the city to settle some things and come back after that." Rinpoche and the Empress were in this desolate wilderness with their limbs tightly intertwined, enjoying the pleasure of their divine senses and physical bodies fusing. 1.5 days later, the environment around them suddenly changed. The Empress was aware of the change in the environment and felt relieved when she realized that there was no one around. 2.5 days later, the two of them finally let go of each other. The Empress's body was covered in a rosy glow, and she was dazzling. "Where is this?" the Empress asked. "The headquarters of Wuxia City." Rinpoche put one hand on his waist and the other on the wall as he looked up at the big hole above him. The two of them had directly broken through more than 10 floors. The quality of the construction is too poor. Rinpoche felt that he had to look for trouble. Due to the strength of the martial artists, Rinpoche specially made all the walls and floors thicker, making them almost 2.5 times thicker than normal. Which construction company was responsible for this? With this quality? Chapter 877. In fact, the commotion caused by Rinpoche and the Empress had already been noticed. This building, which was named Guchuan, had already been put into use. Of course, the area below was mainly used, but the area above was also cleaned every day. Moreover, the sound of them crashing through the floors could be heard from below. However, they were stopped before they could go upstairs. Ning Kaichen. After more than half a year of surgeries, Ning Kaichen finally got what she wanted and went directly to Wuxia City. During the 6 months in Thailand, she had learned a lot of things, including how to use a mobile phone, how to use a computer, pinyin, simplified Chinese, and fluent Thai. She had even reached the level of CET 6 in English. It had to be said that there were always geniuses in this world, such as the Empress and Ning Kaichen. Ning Kaichen was a sword slave and couldn't cultivate. However, she had a learning ability that far exceeded ordinary people. After arriving in Wuxia City, she strolled around for a few days to understand the situation there. After that, she would hold a book and stare blankly at the martial arts center. When Ren Baqian and the Empress caused a floor to collapse, she was aware of it. However, after approaching the floor where they were staying, Green Bead immediately sensed the aura from upstairs. After feeling the entire building shake, as if it was being driven by a pile driver, she immediately retreated and stopped the winged cavalry. Do you want to go up and watch Xiao Prince Consort and Her Majesty consummate their marriage? When Ning Kaichen said this with a smile, the winged cavalry immediately turned pale. Ren Baqian and the Empress changed their clothes before leading her to tour the top 2 floors. Obviously, the Empress was very satisfied with this new home. In particular, the huge supermarket was almost as big as a smaller shopping mall. Half of the space was filled with shelves of dazzling goods, while the other half was filled with all kinds of underwear and clothes. There was also a small candy house. All the clothes here are suitable for Your Majesty's figure. Ren Baqian stood in the supermarket and turned around with an expression that said, "Am I handsome? Quick, praise me." Such an expression. The Empress's mouth twitched a little. She didn't feel that this scene was exaggerated. From her point of view, everything was meant to serve her. She felt that the underwear in front of her. The Empress picked up an inner treasury that looked like 2 ropes and asked, "Did you prepare this for me?" "Actually, there are better ones." Ren Baqian took out sets of sexy lingerie from the rack. Transparent ones, fishnet ones, slit ones, doodle ones. "You want me to wear this?" The Empress hooked the 2 ropes with one finger and smiled faintly. Life is always full of surprises. Ren Baqian put on a serious expression. Otherwise, it would be too boring. "Are you saying that I'm boring you?" The Empress raised her head, pointed her nostrils at him, and had a dangerous look in her eyes. "Ahem, Your Majesty, let's not overinterpret it. We have an ancient person who once wrote in a book, 'There are 2 trees in front of my house. One of them is a date tree, and the other is also a date tree.' Then, it was interpreted by others to mean a lot of things. Maybe he was just trying to reduce the number of words, right? Look, there are a few more words in one go. Isn't that right? Just like what I said just now, although His Majesty is perfect enough, our married life can be a little more surprising, a little more passionate. Then wear it for me." The Empress's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. "I'll wear it then? Your Majesty, don't be touchy. Let me tell you, my waist can't take it anymore." Ren Baqian didn't even give her any discount. He quickly stripped himself clean and wrapped the 2 ropes around his legs. They broke. Ren Baqian swung his waist proudly. "Too small." The Empress looked at Ren Baqian shamelessly swinging his waist and felt suffocated. This guy was getting more and more shameless. She rolled her eyes and suddenly said, "I'm hungry. I heard that there's a kind of poached chicken. Give me 20 of them." Ren Baqian's face froze and he looked down. "Your Majesty, this is a personal attack." The Empress snorted and looked like she wanted to laugh. The 2 of them bickered for a long time before Ren Baqian put on his clothes and prepared to go down to find something to eat. Although the mansion on the top floor was equipped with a kitchen, there weren't even any servants. Ren Baqian felt that his waist couldn't support him making another lunch. In the past, he had always heard people say that they fought for 300 rounds. Ren Baqian estimated that those 300 rounds wouldn't even take 4 days. He was much more awesome than them. When he went downstairs, he saw Ning Kaichen and a group of winged cavalry warriors guarding the elevator. Everyone bowed their heads in greeting. "All of you can leave. Ask the chef to prepare something in large quantities. First, bring a few cows and a few sheep. Be quick," Ren Baqian instructed. "Ning Kaichen, stay behind. Hey, the curator is here. Is that Master's wife? She's much prettier than a celebrity. By the way, have you seen the curator fight?" Whispers came from afar. Some people were curious about Ren Baqian's strength. After all, they could vaguely feel his aura, which was similar to that of those coaches. However, no one knew exactly how strong he was. After all, the coaches often demonstrated to them, and didn't see the curator much, let alone see him fight. He's definitely stronger than the coaches in the gym. Otherwise, how can he intimidate them? Isn't that obvious? The coaches in our gym are all Earth-class experts. I heard that there aren't any Earth-class experts in the army. If the boss is stronger than the coaches, wouldn't he be the best in the world? Do you know Ping Kai Huai? He's one of the top core disciples, but he can't even touch the corner of the boss's clothes. However, the boss only showed his strength once, and I didn't get to see him again. I knew that the curator was an expert the moment I saw him. Look at his forehead and the brightness. I don't know what kind of strange martial arts he practiced. Is that Master's wife? That temperament isn't that of an ordinary person. Why do I feel that Master's wife is stronger than the curator? You can't tell. Although Master's wife is beautiful, she's definitely stronger than the curator. Someone retorted. Ren Baqian glanced over, and saw more than a dozen disciples forming a small circle and whispering. If this group of people continued to gossip, he wouldn't be able to take it anymore. Ren Baqian suddenly looked fierce. Cough cough. Do all of you have nothing to do? This group of people wasn't young, and they were all above the middle level of the manual level. They were considered top experts on Earth, but they were still so gossipy. They didn't have the bearing of an expert at all. Chapter 878. How do you feel? Ren Baqian asked as he and Ning Kaichen found a corner to sit down. I've never felt so good. Ning Kaichen's eyes shone brightly as she spoke. Coupled with her charming face, Ren Baqian felt that there weren't many people in this world who could resist her charm. Sometimes it was really strange. When Ning Kaichen was originally a man, she was delicate and pretty. However, after dressing up as a woman, she immediately underwent earth-shattering changes. Every frown and smile was captivating, making it impossible to associate her with her previous self. If the Ning family saw her now, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize her as their family's sword master even if they were beaten to death. In this situation, Ren Baqian could only say that she was originally suitable to be a woman. How do you feel about this world? It's very interesting. I like it here very much. As Your Highness said, most people in this world have knowledge equivalent to that of a scholar, which is simply shocking. Furthermore, cell phones and computers allow everyone to understand the happenings in every corner of the world. Everyone's knowledge is boundless, and they are much more knowledgeable than the ordinary officials of Great Xia. Ning Kaichen paused for a while as if she had more to say. Ren Baqian waited with great interest for her to continue. Ning Kaichen sorted out her thoughts and said, however, those who can become more than 10,000 people in the Yun Nation and Great Xia are outstanding. If they were placed in this world, they wouldn't be lost in the crowd. It can only be said that the people in this world are simply too blessed by nature, which makes people jealous. No matter how poor they are, they can at least fill their stomachs. As long as they have the heart, they at least have the opportunity to learn knowledge. This alone is something that Great Xia can't achieve. Naturally, only after the productivity is liberated and resources are abundant will people have the energy to do other things. Ren Baqian smiled faintly. This was what he had always wanted to do. To free the people of Dayo from the endless struggle for survival. As for Ning Kaichen's views on the Great Xia officials, Ren Baqian agreed with her. Capable people wouldn't be lost in the crowd. Have you used your mobile phone? Ren Baqian asked. Yes, it's very convenient and interesting. I also have a multi-tone account. I thought it was fun at the time, so I casually used it. Now, I have about 18 million fans? Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. Ren Baqian was confused. What? Douyin. Ren Baqian naturally knew about it. It was a short video social media app from more than 10 years ago. Although homogenization was serious and there was a decline 2 years ago, the number of users was still not small. However, after the entire nation started cultivating, this video platform became popular again. After all, there were many people who wanted to show off. Ordinary people could also see the performance of other martial artists from the videos, and learn some cultivation methods. However, what had Ning Kaichen been doing for the past 6 months? He underwent surgery, recuperated, learned how to use a mobile phone, and even created a WeChat account to become an internet celebrity with 18 million followers? Did you perform a flying sword performance? This thought subconsciously emerged in his mind. Of course not. There are no sword slaves in this world. I've read about sword immortals in xianxia novels and movies, and they're quite similar to us. However, they are much more carefree than us. Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. I performed a sword dance and taught them how to put on makeup, as well as how to make a woman more attractive. Other than giving a thumbs up, Rinpoche didn't know what else to say. Keep a low profile. After all, you still have a mission in the future. Becoming an internet celebrity won't be very beneficial to your mission in the future, Rinpoche said. I like it very much. So many people are paying attention to me and praising me. It's simply wonderful. Ning Kaichen's eyes lit up. Your Highness, you don't have to worry. I can make them unable to recognize me. Makeup can turn me into anyone. Your Highness, do you want to see the so-called celebrities of this world making love to you? Bang. Rinpoche only saw a flash, and Ning Kaichen was gone. There was a hole in the ground where Ning Kaichen had been, and the Empress was looking at him with a faint smile on her face with her hands behind her back. Rinpoche felt that the Empress liked to make this expression more and more. The meaning of this expression could be understood as, how do you want to die? She's a man. Rinpoche's expression didn't change. Your Majesty, are you jealous of men? I'm jealous? Hee. The Empress's expression became more and more unfriendly. I'll take it that you're not, Your Majesty. In my heart, she's a man. She might even be older than me. Rinpoche changed his tone very quickly. Pfft. The Empress spat at him and strolled to the window to watch the wind. After thinking for a while, she turned around and said to Rinpoche, the new palace must be taller and have a better view. There was something that Rinpoche wanted to say. It will collapse very quickly, especially with Your Majesty's tormenting. I reckon that the day the palace is completed will be the day of demolition. Looking down at the big hole in the ground, he could clearly see the steel bars that were as thick as an index finger. Rinpoche began to worry that Ning Kaichen wouldn't be killed by the Empress, right? Ning Kaichen wasn't Tongjinya. Even a winged cavalry warrior from Kismet Heaven couldn't withstand such a blow from the Empress. Moreover, all of her strength came from the spirit swords. Fortunately, there was a sound coming from below. Ning Kaichen pulled away the concrete blocks on her body and climbed up the stairs with a face full of dirt. Rinpoche was relieved. This wasn't the first time that Ning Kaichen had been beaten like this. Why didn't she remember it? When Ning Kaichen came up, tears were rolling down her cheeks. It was truly a pitiful sight. It's bleeding, my face. Rinpoche took a closer look and saw that there were a few cuts on her face. Other than that, there weren't any fractures. It seemed that the Empress had been merciful. It looked fierce, but in fact, the Empress's strength passed through Ning Kaichen and hit the ground directly. Ning Kaichen only had a few more cuts on her face. The Empress must have done it on purpose. Rinpoche felt that, if the Empress didn't change her habit of demolishing things at will, it would be useless to build a new building. Looking at Ning Kaichen carefully examining her face in the mirror, Rinpoche sighed and said, don't look anymore. Your face can still be saved. I still have a box of black mud cream here. Oh, that's fine. Ning Kaichen was just weeping, but in the blink of an eye, she looked calm. Rinpoche really wanted to give her 2 words. Hee. He then asked Ning Kaichen what else she had learned these days to understand her situation, so that he could decide if he should find her a tutor or something. Then, Rinpoche's expression was like this. Why had she finished learning simplified Chinese and Pinyin? Could she operate a computer? Fluent in Thai? Could she pass CET 6 in English? Was she learning Japanese in C? Rinpoche suddenly felt that he didn't need to kidnap any expert or scholar. He could just keep her here for 8 to 10 years before bringing her back. Compared to her, he had lived for more than 30 years. In fact, he had lived quite well. Why did he have to compare himself with others? What was there to compare? Am I such a person with such a strong desire to compare? Continue to learn what you are interested in. In addition, I will get someone to collect information on some people. Your task in the future is to capture these people and bring them here. You have to avoid everyone's attention. In terms of investigation and anti-investigation, it is best for you to learn more about it. Renbachian smiled kindly and suddenly felt a little dispirited. He didn't want to talk to her anymore. Chapter 879. After staying in Wuxia City for a few days, Renbachian and the Empress went out to see what this burgeoning city looked like. It had to be said that this city was different from all the other cities in the country. It was rare to see single flying motorcycles in other cities. After all, air traffic control wasn't a joke. However, there were people from the Armed Forces Command patrolling the sky on flying motorcycles every day. One could be seen basically every 3 to 5 minutes. After all, there were too many experts in Wuxia City, and the supervision had to be stricter. Furthermore, the nation had the idea of using this place as an experimental site. Since ancient times, there hadn't been any references for national martial arts practice, and the nation had to explore it bit by bit. The flying motorcycles were a small matter. What really surprised Renbachian was that in other places, people took public transportation from the car, but many of them took public transportation from the roof. It was common to see a bus passing by, and then there would be people running behind it, jumping onto the roof of the bus in 2 steps, and directly hitching a ride. There were 7 people sitting on the roof of a bus. For a moment, Renbachian wondered if he had come to a country with cheats. In addition, it could be seen that Wuxia City was different from other places. For example, had anyone seen the 36 5 elements continuous saber technique used to cut noodles? Had anyone seen someone use the steel breaking hand to mix noodles? Had anyone seen someone use their fingers to pick up fried glutinous rice balls from a frying pan? Had anyone seen someone use the Tai Fantasy sword to pierce through mutton skewers with 2 iron skewers? Had anyone seen a street sweeper use the chaotic wind staff technique? These past few days had been an eye-opener for Renbachian. Here, martial arts practice was closely related to everyone. Even the ordinary people who were selected had a good foundation and talent. The owners of the small shops on the street might even be a manual expert. In other places, when regular customers and shop owners met, they would greet each other with, "The weather is good today. How's the business?" "It's all right. What do you want?" "Give me a bowl of knife-cut noodles without chopped green onions." Here, the 2 of them would greet each other. "Hey boss, your 5 elements continuous saber technique is really good. Who did you learn from?" "Ha, I won't talk about my master. I don't have the face to mention it if I'm not good at martial arts." "What do you want today?" "Come, let's try first." "No, what if you lose and leave? Wouldn't I be making a loss then?" "If I lose, I'll go bankrupt today just to buy 10 bowls of seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles. If I win, you'll treat me to 10 bowls. All right." The style was completely different. However, Renbachian found it rather interesting. He pulled the Empress forward and said, "Boss, let's practice with you. If we win, you'll treat us to that seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles until we're full." The boss looked him up and down. "Bah, you're an Earth Realm expert. How dare you bully an old man like me?" Renbachian was a little surprised. This old man had good eyesight. "Give me 2 bowls of seafood knife-cut noodles. 8,800 per bowl. That's 17,600 for both of you. This is a small business and we don't take credit." The boss's spirit was instantly lifted. Renbachian's face darkened. "You know that it's an Earth rank expert, yet you still dare to kill it so ruthlessly. The last one is still buried in the ground." "Of course not. What a joke. If I sell it to others for 8,800 per bowl, I'll give you a 50% discount." The old man took out a menu and placed it in front of Renbachian. On the menu, it really wrote, "Seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles, 8,800 per bowl." Renbachian originally thought that the other party was trying to kill him, but it turned out that the price was clearly stated. Renbachian really couldn't say anything. To him, money was just a number. He wanted to try out the taste of a bowl of noodles that cost 8,800. When the noodles were served, Renbachian glanced at them. There was only an oyster in the noodles and nothing else. The taste was quite fragrant. It was filled with a fresh aroma. Renbaqian even felt that he could smell the smell of the sea. This aroma gave Renbaqian some confidence. When the first mouthful of noodles entered his mouth, the freshness, fragrance, tenderness, and smoothness exploded in his mouth in an instant. Renbaqian's eyes widened. He didn't expect to meet an expert. It wasn't that Renbaqian hadn't eaten good food before. Even though the standard of cuisine in that world was poor, the ingredients were delicious. With some seasonings, it was considered a delicacy on Earth. However, this person in front of him was different. He used ingredients from Earth to create a taste that far exceeded that of that world. He was definitely an expert. While Renbaqian was in a daze, the Empress had already poured the noodles into her mouth. "Boss, give me another 50 bowls." Subsequently, the two of them swept away all 50 bowls. The Empress touched her belly and was a little hesitant. She estimated that she could still eat another 100 bowls. However, it was fast to eat but slow to cook. If she continued to eat, she wouldn't be able to leave today. "Thank you for your patronage. 456,000. The old man came over with a smile to settle the bill. "Boss, I'm lacking a chef. Are you interested?" Renbaqian grinned as he settled the bill. He had the intention of abducting this old man, but he still had to pay. "Your surname is Ren?" the old man asked with a smile. "You're really well informed. There's only so many people in this circle. If I didn't know anything, I wouldn't have lived to this day. It's not impossible for me to be your chef. What's your price?" You can read all the manual techniques and some earth will techniques in the martial arts center. Although the chances of you reaching the earth will level at your age aren't high, it's not impossible. If the disciples in the martial arts center want to read these techniques, they have to accumulate merit points to exchange for them. It's not a loss for you to be my chef, but you can't leak any information. The old man's eyes lit up, and he laughed. It's indeed not a loss. It's a pity that I'm old, and my thoughts have faded. I'll have to disappoint you. However, this old man could recommend someone whose culinary skills were no worse than this old man's. If you think it's okay, I'll ask him to look for you. Renbaqian couldn't help but laugh. This old man was quite astute. How pitiful all parents are. One chef isn't enough. If there's anyone with similar skills, ask them to look for me together. If you're willing to come, you can come along. Then you're my boss. How should I address you? My surname is Sun Zhongliang. Renbaqian was in a good mood after leaving. He didn't expect to meet a chef when he came out for a stroll. He didn't have to pay much, and merely let Sun Zhongliang take a look at the techniques. For others, this was a great benefit. For him, the techniques that he brought back from Tianjing Basin were almost moldy, and another batch was shipped back from the Yun Nation. The next day, Sun Zhongliang came over. Not only him, but his son and grandson also came. The whole family of 3 was here. Renbaqian thought about it and simply asked Sun Zhongliang to bring his family over and let them live in the building. This way, he and the Empress could come back anytime they wanted to eat. The building had more than 30 floors, and the bottom 2 floors were dedicated to guest rooms. There was plenty of space. For the next 2 days, the Empress thought of something while watching TV. She suddenly went downstairs to grab Ning Kaichen, stuffed her into the room, and stripped her clean. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Renbaqian looked into the room and was a little confused. He didn't know what the Empress was doing at all. "Get out. If you dare to peek, I'll gouge out your eyeballs." After a while, the Empress came out of the room contentedly. She looked at Renbaqian, who had a strange look on his face, and calmly said, "I just want to see the difference between an acquired and an inborn woman." "What's the difference?" Renbaqian was a little curious after hearing the Empress mention it. "You want to know?" "I'm really a little curious." "Do you want to see?" Renbaqian wisely chose to give up his curiosity when he saw the Empress's increasingly dangerous gaze. It's meaningless to think about it. "Forget it, I won't look." The Empress would always be the Empress. Even if she became his wife, she would still be the Empress, and he couldn't afford to provoke her. After staying for 7 days, Renbaqian and the Empress returned to Dayo. They first went to the plain that they had been to a few days ago, and they didn't expect to see the people from the Ministry of Works there. Even Tang Xinye was there. He had his hands on his hips, licked the toothpaste in one hand, and fished with his little penis from time to time. When Ren Baqian and the Empress returned, there was a snake-like fish with fangs hanging on Tang Xinye's little penis. Upon seeing the two of them, he quickly pulled the fish down, pulled up his pants, and greeted them indifferently. Ren Baqian was shocked on the spot. "Old man, you are really a talent." Chapter 880. Ren Baqian had always known that Tang Xinye wasn't a good person, but he didn't expect him to be like this. This was beyond his imagination. Ren Baqian was dumbfounded. Oh, the Empress was almost the same. Sigma. After all, Tang Xinye had done such a big thing, so it was normal for him to feel awkward for a moment. However, Tang Xinye looked calm and collected. "Sir Tang, what are you doing?" Ren Baqian hesitated and asked cautiously. "It tastes good." Tang Xinye waved the toothpaste in his hand. "It can even produce foam. I have a box of it in my residence." "I'm not talking about this. Sir Tang, what were you doing just now?" Ren Baqian gestured. "I went to relieve myself in the morning, but a blind dog bit me." Tang Xinye had a wretched look on his face. Ren Baqian heaved a sigh of relief. However, he thought about it again and realized that it wasn't right. Tang Xinye said it was in the morning, but the sun was already high above their heads. The people in this world did not have the habit of sleeping in the wee hours of the morning and waking up at noon. If they said it was morning, then it was really morning. They usually woke up at around 4 o'clock, cleaned up and had something to eat. At around 6 o'clock, they had to go to the palace and attend court at 7 o'clock. "Sir Tang, it's noon now." Ren Baqian pointed to the top of his head. "I want to see if its teeth are harder or my spear is sharper." Tang Xinye's face was full of pride. At this moment, Ren Baqian finally knew from whom Tang Lan learned how to raise her small face and put on an arrogant expression. "Then it was the whole morning?" Tang Xinye waved at Ren Baqian, grabbed him by the neck, and walked out while whispering, "Hey Zhao Prince Consort, let me tell you. This thing looks scary and has a mouthful of fangs, but it doesn't have any in its throat. Instead it keeps sucking. I reckon that this thing is used to swallowing things in its stomach. It looks scary and quite comfortable." Ren Baqian. Winky face this time. "Even God won't be able to save you. Are you whispering to me with that voice of yours? Why do I hear that you are showing off?" The clouds behind the Empress had turned into a typhoon. Ren Baqian could clearly feel that the surrounding air pressure had dropped. He hurriedly jumped 10 meters away to keep a distance from Tang Xinye. Unexpectedly, the Empress didn't flare up. Before the storm swept out, she withdrew it. Ignoring Tang Xinye, she said faintly, "I want to fish." "I'll get a fishing rod for Her Majesty." Ren Baqian had a bad feeling about this. "No need." The Empress smiled at Tang Xinye and said, "Minister of Works, I want to fish. I'll have to trouble you to be the bait." Tang Xinye's tone sounded like an exclamation mark. In the next second, the Empress kicked Tang Xinye to the ground. Then she lifted his calf and threw his upper body into the river. Seeing that he was trying to move, she kicked him. Tang Xinye immediately lost all his strength. Other than the calf that the Empress was holding onto, his entire body was submerged in the water. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress threw Tang Xinye out of the river. He was 400 kilograms when he went into the water, and when he came back up, he became 300 kilograms. His body was covered with those strange black, snake-like fish. After fishing for an afternoon, they caught more than 2,000 kilograms of strange fish. One of them was 6 to 7 meters long, and was thicker than a bucket. It could swallow Tang Xinye directly. If it really swallowed him, the consequences would be obvious. That night, Ren Baqian and the others ate that strange fish. Even though this strange fish didn't look very good, its flesh was extremely tender, and had very few bones. It was very praiseworthy. In particular, Ren Baqian discovered that the worms on the strange fish could add a lot of flavor to the soup, and their effects were similar to chicken essence. This was because Ren Baqian cleaned the fish that he and the Empress caught. After cooking it, he found that Tang Xinye's fish was much more delicious. He could smell that it was different from his own fish from afar. At first he thought that it was because the fish was too big, which made the taste worse. After trying it out, he realized that the problem was actually with the worms on the strange fish. At first, Renbachian was prepared to kill as many strange fish as possible in the river, but he changed his mind at this time. This fish tasted good, contained a lot of energy, and had very few bones. The aboriginals who didn't like to eat fish should be able to accept it. Besides, weren't those little worms the best chicken essence? These two kinds of creatures had a lot of value in breeding. Naturally, Renbachian wasn't thinking about how to make money. Instead, he was thinking about how to rely on these things to drive a batch of industries and support a lot of people. Although he had a lot of things that could drive a batch of industries, these were more suitable for the aboriginals. Renbachian had always intended to lure the aboriginals out of the 60,000 mountains. However, the aboriginals were different from the ordinary people who had lived on the plains for decades. They were more ferocious, and they were naturally very good at fighting, hunting, and even killing. If they weren't too scattered, they could be directly used as elite soldiers. However, they were much worse in other aspects, especially in terms of their ferocious temperaments. The people of Lon City were also ferocious, but the aboriginals were used to using swords, which could easily cause trouble. If Renbachian wanted to use these aboriginals, he had to first let them get used to life on the plains, which was completely different from fighting and killing in the mountains. On the other hand, farming was not a bad idea. This river could feed tens of thousands of people without a problem. Renbachian took note of this matter, and walked around this remote area with the Empress for a few days. He also asked the people from the Ministry of Works to measure the land on the plains between the two rivers before returning. Just as Renbachian returned to the palace, a convoy arrived in Lon City. It was a majestic convoy of hundreds of ox carts. The ruts on each cart were deep, and one could tell at a glance that the carts were filled with goods. Military advisor Ching, is this Lon City? Are we going to this god-forsaken place to get food? The curtain of a carriage was lifted, and a man with a full beard poked his head in. Qing Lian was holding a book in one hand, and drawing something on a wooden board with the other. When she heard Renbachian's question, she didn't even raise her head and said, "This is Dayo. Spirit wheel experts are everywhere, and earth wheel experts are like dogs. Perhaps the person who passed by you is an earth wheel expert. If they hear what you said, don't expect me to save you. You aren't the only envoy who has died in Lon City over the years. Is it that exaggerated?" The burly man coughed dryly. He knew that there were many aboriginal experts. The aboriginal commoners he met along the way were all at the man-will level, which was indeed terrifying. However, based on what he had seen and heard along the way, there weren't many earth-will experts either. Of course, the number of earth-wheel experts was much higher than that of Great Xia. However, according to Qing Lian, it was too exaggerated. Do you think this is Great Xia? Here, without the strength of a spirit wheel expert, one can't even enter the imperial court. Qing Lian pouted. The reason why you saw so few earth wheel experts along the way is that most of them have joined the militia, and are now busy plundering in the Yun nation, and guarding the captives. But where is this? This is the capital of Dayo. Let me remind you, look more and talk less. It doesn't matter if you die, but if there is any delay, I will let Kong Mingzi summon your soul back and torture it for 100 years. Upon hearing the words Kong Mingzi, the burly man's expression changed slightly. He put down the curtain, turned his head, and muttered a few words. Idiot. Qing Lian moved her lips in the carriage. She wasn't afraid that he would hear her from outside. This General Huaiji was really an idiot. Chapter 881. It was the second day since Renbachian met Qing Lian. In fact, Renbachian already knew that this group had passed through Ping City 13 days ago. He only found out last night that Qing Lian was with them. Early the next morning, Renbachian saw a graceful lady waiting in front of the academy. He had arranged to meet Qing Lian in the afternoon, but when he saw her now, he understood that she was here to familiarize herself with him. After all, she was his student, so he didn't say much and let her in. They sat down and Renbachian looked at Qing Lian. After more than a year in the volunteer army, she hadn't changed much. Her skin hadn't darkened, and she hadn't become more resolute. She seemed to be the same gentle lady from back then. Principal, I'm here to return the books. Qing Lian had a wide forehead and a big mouth, but these weren't flaws on her face. She was very beautiful when she smiled. The most important thing was that she had a scholarly temperament, which was rare in this world. Ren Baqian brought a few books over. 3 of them were about mathematics, and the other 2 were about probability. One of them even touched on calculus. For this world, this was rather advanced knowledge. Alright, on Earth, this was considered a rather complicated knowledge. Who knew how many people would wish they were dead? In any case, Ren Baqian knew that it would be as difficult as defeating the Empress if he wanted to pass. Do you understand? Ren Baqian had a kind smile on his face, but his heart was full of malice. He wanted to let the natives of this world experience the power of calculus. He originally wanted to lock his students in the classroom in a few years, and let them pull their hair out in front of calculus. He didn't expect someone to see it in advance. I understand most of it, but there's one thing I don't quite understand. I was just about to ask you. There's still something I don't understand about the fixed point theorem. Qing Lian took out a wooden board and used a hairpin to engrave numbers on it. Here, let F be a continuous mapping from a sphere to itself. There must be a point C such that FC equals C, or C. That is, F either has a fixed point or a point that maps to its opposite point. The smile on Ren Baqian's face immediately froze. The terrifying memory of being dominated by calculus resurfaced in his mind. He felt a toothache and the urge to pull his hair out. Oh, he had no hair now. Stop. Ren Baqian quickly stopped her and asked with a strange expression. Are you here to test me today? How could I? I'm also a student of Principal Zhang, and I'm here today to ask for advice. I don't think anyone in this world can answer my question except for you. Qing Lian blinked her eyes and said. She thought about the reason why Ren Baqian had rejected her. The probability of the reason being true was 30%, the probability of not being able to answer was 50%, and the other possibilities were 20%. In other words, there was a 50% probability that Ren Baqian could answer her question. The probability of him meeting someone who could answer this question within 3 years was 1 in a million. In 10 years, the probability was 1 in 10,000. In 20 years, the probability was 1 in 100. This probability would increase with time. In other words, there was a high probability that he would meet someone who could answer his questions after 20 years. That was too long. He still had to rely on Zhao Prince Consort. Ren Baqian inexplicably got goosebumps all over his body. He suddenly felt that Qing Lian's calm and serene expression was probably a demon, right? Ren Baqian would never touch calculus again. However, he couldn't admit defeat at this time. The batch of students that you know will graduate in 2 months. After graduation, some of them will continue to learn more advanced knowledge. If you can give up everything and return to the academy, I will teach you about calculus. I borrowed your books because you are sincere about learning, but now, in what capacity are you asking me for advice? Ren Baqian felt that he had found a good excuse. After all, she wasn't a student of the academy anymore, but a military counselor of a great Xia volunteer army. You aren't my student now, so I naturally won't answer such a profound question. Well, this reason wasn't very good, but Ren Baqian couldn't think of a better one, so he didn't reveal his fear. Qing Lian was stunned, and then pursed her lips into a smile. I was too presumptuous. Following which, he smiled extremely brilliantly, and proposed a request that had a success rate of 87%. In order to better communicate with Dayo, Duke Su wants to send an envoy to Lan City. I want to settle some matters and become the envoy. When the time comes, Principal Ren, please don't reject me from returning to the residence to study. Ren Baqian was surprised. Send an envoy? In what name? Su Gong was Su Qing, who established himself after the uprising. At this time, although the volunteer army had reached a scale of 1 million people, it was still a peasant army after all. It was normal to want some help from Dayo, but sending an envoy to Dayo was more interesting. In the name of King Ping, Qing Lian smiled. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqian tapped his fingers on the table as he pondered. Great Xia had almost exhausted its vitality in the previous 2 wars with Dayo. In addition, corrupt officials imposed exorbitant taxes, and there were spies sent by Su Qing. People in many places had no way to make a living. Su Qing started with the slogan "Equal Rations." This slogan swept a large number of people who couldn't survive. In addition, Great Xia was short of soldiers at that time, so it became popular in a short period of time. Although Great Xia's elite soldiers were almost wiped out, there were still many valiant generals in the imperial court. After 1 or 2 years, they trained a group of soldiers who could fight. Although they lost half of their power, they gradually stabilized their position. At this time, both sides were in a state of tug-of-war, and it would be difficult to make a breakthrough in a short period of time. Under such circumstances, Su Qing wanted to proclaim himself king. Rinpoche thought about it. In a situation where it was difficult to make progress in a short period of time, proclaiming himself king wasn't the best way, but it could also calm people down. It would be reasonable if he sent an envoy after proclaiming himself king. As for more details, I will tell you when I have an audience with Her Highness in the afternoon. Qing Lian bowed slightly. Rinpoche nodded. In the afternoon he would have an audience with Her Highness as an envoy, which would be a public affair. Now he was indeed here as a private person. Unfortunately, why did he mention calculus? I want to borrow a few more books to read. You won't refuse me, right? Just now, you said that you saw my sincerity in learning, Qing Lian said as she tucked her hair behind her ear. Go. Rinpoche waved his hand. Take your wooden board away. I'll leave it here. If I don't understand it when I come again, I will have to wait for you to answer my questions when I return to the academy. Qing Lian bowed again before retreating. Rinpoche sat in the chair, looked at the symbols on the wooden board, and felt his brain and teeth begin to hurt. A long time after Qing Lian left, Rinpoche carried the wooden board out, dug a hole, and buried it in it. Only then did he feel a little better. He sat back in his office and began to ponder. Although Qing Lian had learned mathematics before, it was at most at the junior high school level. When it came to Rinpoche, she had systematically learned modern geometry and algebra in elementary and junior high school. He didn't expect to learn calculus now. Without anyone to teach her, she had learned high school and university mathematics by herself, and had reached a very high level. This was another cheat. He had to admit that there were always some people in the world who were loved by heaven and earth. For example, the Empress was good at martial arts, Ning Kaichen was on earth, and this Qing Lian. Huh? Rinpoche suddenly thought of something. Ning Kaichen and Qing Lian? Did he only know 2 sword masters? Both of them were so talented? Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Did he meet even geniuses? Rinpoche suddenly remembered that 1,000 years ago, there was a magnificent period when thousands of sword masters were born and fought against each other, leaving behind quite a bit of fame. However, that period was too long ago, and the records were vague, so he didn't think too much about it. After that, sword masters were prohibited from entering the imperial court as officials. The reason was very simple. Sword masters needed a lot of resources to build the sword cleansing pool, so the possibility of corruption and bribery was too high. In addition, sword masters had to spend a lot of energy to buy rare treasures for the sake of their lifespan. They even spent a long time searching for them in barren mountains and forests. Naturally, they gradually became less eye-catching. However, at this time, Rinpoche suddenly realized a problem after having some doubts in his heart. How many of the spirit wheel experts from 1,000 years ago were recorded in the history books and spread throughout the world? Perhaps even the disciples of their own sects didn't know about them. 1,000 years and dozens of generations were really too long. Sword masters didn't have a long lifespan, and there were very few spirit wheel experts. The number of sword masters was definitely less than that of martial artists. Under such circumstances, being able to leave a heavy mark in history wasn't just because of strength, right? Could it be that the sword master's skills were wrong? Even though they couldn't practice martial arts, they were far more talented than ordinary people in other aspects? If that was the case, it would be a little scary. Chapter 882. That afternoon, Renbaqian met Qing Lian in the palace again. "Greetings, Your Highness." Qing Lian stepped forward and bowed. "Well, we're acquaintances. Tell me about your purpose." Renbaqian nodded and chuckled. "I heard that you brought hundreds of carriages into the city. Are you here to return the money?" "You're right, Your Highness. I'm here to return the money. I've never forgotten the agreement between you and Su Gong," Qing Lian said. "However, in addition to returning the money, there's one more thing I need your help with. This is a piece of cake for you." "Tell me about it." Renbaqian had some guesses after learning about Qing Lian's team last night. Although he didn't know much about Su Qing's situation in the north, he could more or less guess it. When Su Qing revolted, the people in many prefectures, Great Xia was divided into regions by prefectures, had no way to live. Su Qing swept away millions of refugees, and the two sides fought in full swing, affecting more than just millions of people. Large areas of the people were displaced, dragged into the chaos, or busy fleeing for their lives. The discipline of this peasant rebellion was completely imaginable. Wherever they went, they would be like locusts passing through. Who was going to farm under such circumstances? If no one was going to farm, they would definitely have to buy food. "Your Highness, in addition to returning part of the promised reward, we also want to buy some food," Qing Lian said respectfully. "Hee." Renbaqian laughed happily, and his unfathomable laughter echoed throughout the hall. "Coming to Dayo to buy food. I can't believe you can think of this." Dayo had been short of food for 10,000 years, and the annual import of food also accounted for a large proportion. Of course, this was 2 years ago. "Your Highness, let's not talk about the fact that the Yun nation is now occupied by Dayo. Dayo itself is no longer short of food, and is even rich. If you can lend us a helping hand at this time, we will be very grateful. Besides, if we are defeated, there will be no benefit for you. If we continue to be in a stalemate with the Great Xia court, that is what you want to see the most." Qing Lian straightened up and spoke slowly. Her voice was full of confidence in her own knowledge. She believed that what she said was what Renbaqian wanted. "Great Xia. To be honest, I have no opinion on Great Xia after Xia Baichong died. By the way, do you think I care about Great Xia?" Renbaqian laughed. "I don't care who wins or loses, or if you each take a side. I believe Your Highness's words. Controlling the Yun nation was akin to controlling the lifeline of Dayo. Whether it was salt, food, or weapons, they would no longer be able to restrict Dayo. Soldiers had always been Dayo's strong suit. Coupled with Your Highness's wisdom, Dayo has no shortcomings. Perhaps they are only fighting for the right to rule that land for a few decades." She raised her head and stared at Renbaqian without blinking. "I'm not interested in that piece of land." Renbaqian shook his head. This was the truth. He really wasn't interested in that piece of land. It was not easy to occupy, conquer and rule a country. Whoever did it would know. If it weren't for his bald head, he felt that his hair would have turned white by now. And this was only the Yun nation. In fact, this area was enough for him to play around in. Dayo, together with the Yun nation, was equivalent to 3/5 of China. If it were on Earth, it would be considered a superpower. The endless treasures in the 60,000 mountains and the mineral resources of the Yun nation were all waiting for him to develop. There was no need to forcibly occupy another piece of land, bear the hostility of many people, and have a headache every day in order to eliminate the rebels and appease the people. In fact, Renbaqian wanted to see high-rise buildings, cars, trains, ships, and planes in Dayo. The stark contrast between the feudal society outside the border would be very interesting. Qing Lian could tell that Renbaqian's words were true, but she also understood that people would change. Even if the other party wasn't interested now, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be interested in the future. In any case, there is no harm in having a friendly regime with Dayo. It will also save you a lot of trouble in the future. Qing Lian had a smile on her face. Her prediction of the success rate of this trip was 90%. Therefore, no matter what Renbaqian said, she wouldn't be worried. However, Renbaqian didn't intend to keep her in suspense. He was going to agree to her request anyway. The yield of those high-yield crops was too high. The local crop yield of 300 to 400 caddies per mu had jumped to 3,000 to 7,000 caddies per mu. And there were even 2 crops a year. It was estimated that after the harvest in 2 months, the price of sweet potatoes would drop to 5 copper coins per kilogram. Recently, Renbachian was preparing to promote cellars and saltpeter to make ice to store these crops. At the same time, he was sorting out the production process of sweet potato wine, sweet potato starch, and vermicelli. If he could sell a batch, it would relieve a lot of pressure. After the harvest in 2 months, it would be the rainy season, and he had half a year to slowly prepare. Let's get down to business. How much money did you bring and how many caddies of food do you want to buy? Renbachian asked. Qing Lian wasn't surprised to hear this. Your Highness, we brought a total of 15 million taels of gold, silver, and jewelry. 10 million taels is 10% of the portion agreed upon by Su Gong and Sir. The remaining 5 million taels of gold and silver will be used to buy sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. Renbachian calculated in his heart. According to the current market price, sweet potatoes were 3 copper coins per caddy, 30 copper coins per bucket, and 300 copper coins per stone. However, he definitely couldn't sell them at 3 copper coins per caddy. First of all, the market price would be affected. Moreover, many of them had to be transported from other places. Together with the transportation costs, he had to sell them at least at 6 copper coins per caddy. Furthermore, after they bought these high-yielding crops in bulk, they would be able to bear fruit in the region occupied by Su Qing in the second half of this year to next year. In any case, he brought them back from Earth. Did they pay any copyright fees? This was only for sweet potatoes. The price of potatoes and pumpkins was even higher. Renbachian silently calculated for a while before looking up and saying, I can sell you 1 million caddies of sweet potatoes, 500,000 caddies of potatoes, 500,000 caddies of pumpkins, and 150,000 four-corn cows. In addition, I will send someone to Ping City to deliver them over 5 months. You will have to pay an extra 2 million taels. The price was equivalent to 7 times the current market price. However, the price couldn't be calculated according to the market price. 2 million caddies was equivalent to 100,000 tons. In this era, this was simply an insane amount of transportation. With the current muddy roads, an ox cart generally weighed about half a ton. Based on the calculation of a month's round trip, 5 round trips would require 40,000 ox carts and 20,000 escorts. During this period, the consumption of food would also be a significant figure. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Qing Lian smiled and didn't have any intention of bargaining. In fact, it was already a success to be able to buy so much food here. As for the price, it was the least of their concerns. Most of the time, it wasn't that the more you bought, the cheaper it was that the more you bought, the more expensive it was. Needless to say, other than Dayo, they simply had no other place to buy food. Renbachian was already being kind by selling them at this price. He was also considerate enough to deliver the goods to Ping City. Of course, the harvest wasn't small either. 7 million taels was more than the annual income of Dayo's national treasury. Furthermore, this was the first time such a large amount of money had flowed back to Dayo apart from robbery. After settling the matter, Renbachian could finally ask the questions he wanted to ask. Chapter 883. You're done talking. Next, tell me something that interests me. Renbachian twisted his buttocks a few times on the couch. To be honest, it wasn't comfortable to sit on this thing at all. The back of the couch was very far away, and he couldn't lean on it at all. Next time, it would be better to find someone to make a chair, and let people carry it wherever they go. Please speak, Your Highness. How many sword masters are there in the world now? The sword master usually did not fight with others, so it was almost impossible to tell. Moreover, they usually appeared in places where there were few people. Therefore, other than themselves, no one knew how many sword masters there were in the world. In fact, Renbachian suspected that they didn't even know. About 100 people. Qing Lian was a little uncertain. She then added, between 120 and 150 people. How do you know this number? How many have you seen? Renbachian immediately looked interested. In fact, There is an organization whose members are all sword slaves. Of course, there are also some ordinary people and cultivators who mainly serve sword slaves. This number was the number that the people in the organization had once said that there were 110 members. In addition to those who have not been found and those who have just become sword masters, I believe that there are no more than 150 people, and no less than 120 people. This was not easy to deduce. Sometimes 10 sword masters would appear in a year, and sometimes not even one would appear in several years. There was no pattern at all. Of course, it's also possible that the timeline we paid attention to was too short, so we didn't discover the pattern. If we stretch the timeline to a few thousand years, or even longer, we might be able to find a pattern. As for those I've seen, there are only 8 of them. Qing Lian replied after thinking carefully. He immediately thought of the organization that Ning Kaichen had mentioned. What's that organization called? How do I contact him? What does this organization do? Did they look for you? How did they determine your identities? Ren Baqian pondered for a moment before throwing out a series of questions. This organization is called Shadow Dream. It's said that every leader's spirit sword is Shadow Dream. In fact, Shadow Dream had existed for a long time. It was said that it had survived from the most glorious era of the sword slaves 1,000 years ago. The main thing is for the sword masters to exchange materials with each other. They will also release information about some missions. You can complete missions to obtain materials that you need or the detailed location of certain materials. Ning Kaichen said that this organization had just appeared, but Qing Lian said that it had existed for a long time, at least 1,000 years. The latter's words were more trustworthy. Ning Kaichen might have just come into contact with the organization, so her knowledge was limited. However, in order to attract people to join an organization, shouldn't they first introduce their organization's long history to increase their persuasiveness? This was a little strange. Could it be 2 different organizations? However, there were only over 100 sword masters in total, so how could there be 2 organizations? Also, it said that the method they used to determine the sword master is related to the Shadow Dream. Sword master, is there only one organization? Ren Baqian asked doubtfully. Since your highness is asking this, it seems that you have come into contact with other sword masters. Is it that Ning Kaichen? In the past, there had only been one organization. However, the members of the organization had different beliefs. Some of them held on to the idea that they had always been detached from the world, while others believed that sword slaves should be restored to their former glory. At the very least, they shouldn't have to live in the wilderness from birth to death. He should grasp more power and force others to search for resources for him. These 2 viewpoints had existed for a long time. 4 years ago, they finally split due to some matters. One of them is called Shadow Dream, and the other established an organization called Hidden Dream. Qing Lian introduced. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqian finally understood. Ning Kaichen was probably one of the few sword masters who hadn't been recruited before. He had only come into contact with Hidden Dream and not Shadow Dream. According to the timeline, he was found by Hidden Dream after he came to Dayo. Are the people in Hidden Dream inclined to drift away from the world? How many people are there on both sides? Ren Baqian calculated in his mind, and felt that the latter should be easier to deal with. The former could actually be contacted as well. This group of people was actually divided into 2 groups. One group had a desire for power that had already taken root in their hearts. These people were unstable factors. The other group wanted to drive ordinary people to help them search for materials. He could completely recruit these people, as long as they could meet his requirements. What harm was there in satisfying their wishes? Ren Baqian then learned from Qing Lian about some of the situations that she knew. Among them, Shadow Dream had the most people. There were about 80 of them, and only 7 or 8 of them were at the spirit will level. The rest were equivalent to the earth will level. Among these people, only a few had a desire for power. Even among the 7 or 8 spirit will sword masters, most of them only hoped to find materials more quickly by driving ordinary people. They were also greedy for the prosperity of the world. After all, sword masters were also human, and most people still liked the prosperous world. The loneliness of searching for materials in the wild for a long time was indeed unbearable. However, if they wanted to drive ordinary people or even martial artists, they had to have a certain amount of power. As for Hidden Dream, there were only about 20 people, and 5 or 6 of them were Spirit Will Sword Masters. What's their contact information? Is Your Highness very interested in them? In fact, they are just some pitiful people. Qing Lian's tone was slightly sarcastic when she said the latter half of the sentence. At the same time, she was also laughing at herself because she was the same kind of person as them. Indeed, I have a conjecture that I need them to help me verify. Are any of the sword masters that you have come into contact with particularly talented in this area? For example, So Your Highness has taken a fancy to this ability. Qing Lian smiled slightly and her face relaxed a little. After all, she was the same kind of person as them. So, how does Your Highness want to treat them? If it's as I think I can reach an agreement with them. They will work for me in exchange for the materials they want. They don't have to stay away from the prosperity of the world and roam the wilderness every day. I can also mobilize enough manpower to search for what they want. There are countless treasures in the 60,000 mountains, and no one except the aboriginals can get their hands on them. What does Your Highness want them to do? Qing Lian showed a look of interest when she heard this. Perhaps do some research and study the operation of heaven and earth, just like what you learned in school. Perhaps they will become teachers and be responsible for teaching students. The specifics will depend on how far they can go. This is also a good opportunity for them. Whether it is to search for materials in the wilderness or to carry out missions, they will inevitably encounter danger. As long as they use their spirit swords, they will lose their lifespan. However, they don't have to worry at all with me. Qing Lian became even more interested. Great Xia and the previous royal family were tempted by the strength of the sword masters, but they followed the rules and didn't dare to use them. Even if they kept 2 sword masters in private, it was also because of their fighting strength. This was because the sword masters usually looked like ordinary people and wouldn't be guarded against. If they were used for assassination, the success rate was extremely high. However, there was a problem. As long as the sword masters fought, they would lose their lifespan. Ren Baqian wasn't interested in the sword master's fighting ability, but their talent in learning. This was very refreshing to her. If what Ren Baqian said was true, then it was indeed an opportunity for many sword masters. I hope that you can help me contact some sword masters. You can use your own resources to contact them or issue missions through those organizations. I want to test whether they are like what I think they are, Ren Baqian said. What can they get? The results of this test can be seen in a few months at the latest, and there are no risks. If they don't pass the test, I can send 10 winged cavalry warriors to accompany them into the 60,000 mountains to search for the materials they need. The time limit is 6 months. No matter how much they find, it will belong to them. If they pass the test, they will have to stay in Lan City. I can promise them to choose a rare material as a reward. As for the quantity, it will be increased or decreased according to the value of the material. I will satisfy them. I can go back and try to contact them. Is there a requirement for strength? No. Understood. I will inform Her Highness as soon as possible. If there is any problem, it is that Lan City is a little different from the prosperous world they imagined. Very soon, Lan City will be more prosperous than any city they have ever seen. Ren Baqian laughed. Chapter 884. Qing Lian stayed in Lan City for a week before leaving. She still had to help Ren Baqian contact a few sword masters. As for the others, they stayed in Lan City. After all, Qing Lian could leave the matter of purchasing so much food, but they couldn't. This was related to the lives of millions of people in the Revolutionary Army and the stability of the rear. As long as the food was transported back and planted, a large amount of food would calm the people and completely stabilize the Revolutionary Army in a year. Correspondingly, the people in the areas controlled by Great Xia were still in dire straits. It could be said that these high-yield food were the best trump card against Great Xia. Even if Great Xia could obtain these food and plant them on a large scale, it would take 2 to 3 years. A lot of things could happen during this time. Therefore, they had to pay attention to this food, which was even more important than their own lives. However, Less than a week after Qing Lian left, half of the more than 700 revolutionary soldiers were seriously injured, and the other half were lightly injured. The surplus general who led the army had half of his bones broken. Ren Baqian scratched his head when he received the report. At first, only some of the great Xia people were beaten up. In fact, they weren't the ones who caused trouble. After all, they weren't fools. After all, foreigners were still relatively rare in Lan City. Jing tribe? That was his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. People from the Yun nation? Now, it was also his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. When they heard that they were from Great Xia and that they had a war with Great Xia 2 years ago, some people immediately started to provoke and cause trouble. Then there was a natural conflict, and dozens of Great Xia people were seriously injured. The Aboriginals were experienced in fighting all year round. They knew how to control their strength and didn't kill a single one of them. The most serious one only had about 30 broken bones. General Huaiji was furious when he received the news. Where was the law? Although this was the territory of the Aboriginals, there was no need to bully them like this. He couldn't just be a coward, could he? Would he still be able to be a human when he went back? Then he led his men away. At first, 7 or 8 people ganged up on 30 to 40 of them. When they arrived, it became 70 to 80 people ganging up on 600 to 700 of them. After reading the report, Ren Baqian felt that this group of people was too much. In particular, the people from the Public Order Bureau stood by and watched. Where was the law? Dayo was a society governed by law. Well, not yet. When Ren Baqian first arrived, the Aboriginal commoners often fought with the foreign merchants until their brains came out. The punishment was only 3 to 10 lashes of the whip, and they would be able to recover after lying in bed for 8 to 10 days. Ren Baqian rubbed his forehead and went to find the Empress. The Empress was recuperating her pregnancy. The method of recuperating her pregnancy was watching the computer, eating sweets, fruits, and alcohol. Ren Baqian still wanted to fight against the Empress's habit of letting go. However, after arguing for 4 days, Ren Baqian put his hands on his waist and gave in. If he continued to argue, he would die before he could fulfill his ambitions. He could only hope that the Empress was strong enough and that the son in her womb was strong enough. It could also be a daughter. In any case, whatever it was, even if it was a ball. Your Majesty. Ren Baqian slammed the report on the table. The Empress raised her head and looked at him. Then, she leaned back and placed her hand on her belly. With a lazy look on her face, she said, "There's another one in my tummy. I can't stand being bullied or frightened. Your Majesty, can't you learn something good? Don't always learn from those things in TV dramas. Besides, who would dare to bully you? You can fight 8 people with one hand." Ren Baqian felt that if there was anything worse than an indifferent Empress, it would be an Empress who had nothing better to do than learn from TV dramas. With your physique, you can probably fight 800 people. The Empress gestured with her hand. At least 800, Ren Baqian added. Aren't you busy right now? What's the matter this time? The Empress raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Your Majesty, take a look. Ren Baqian sighed. The Empress glanced at it and sat back. How do you think I should deal with this? A country has its laws. Ren Baqian stated the pros and cons in a deep voice. Your Majesty, things are different now. Not only are the people of Great Xia watching, but it doesn't matter what they think. The Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation are watching to see how you will deal with this. The Aboriginal commoners and officials are also watching to see how you will deal with this. If you let them go this time, they will naturally be more daring in the future. Next time, they will still dare to do this. Not only to the people of Great Xia, but also to the Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation. The Empress looked at Ren Baqian with one finger under her chin, and suddenly laughed. When you speak like this, you are actually quite pleasing to the eye. All right, I understand and will give them an explanation. Those who beat people will receive 30 lashes each. The public order officers who were present at the scene at the time will receive 60 lashes each for incompetence. If there is a next time, they will be dismissed from the public order department. As for the people of Great Xia, I will arrange for the medical bureau to treat them. Ren Baqian nodded. Such an outcome would be able to intimidate some people. The brains of the aboriginals were full of muscles and couldn't remember many things for long. However, the public order department should be able to remember everything from top to bottom. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first, Rinpoche said. I'm very bored. Keep me company, the Empress said lazily. Rinpoche calculated that he still had to go to the Ministry of Works in the afternoon and meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. The balance in his heart began to sway. On one hand he placed his work, and on the other hand he placed the Empress. Was there a need to choose? I'm a person who works hard for the people, Rinpoche said righteously. Oh, I just realized that today. The Empress looked at him with a faint smile. Compared to the people, Your Majesty is obviously more important. Rinpoche's expression didn't change at all. Forget it, you can go. If you continue to say that, I will feel that I'm an incapable ruler. The Empress waved her hand in frustration. How can that be? Rinpoche sat beside the Empress and laughed. Half a day won't make a difference. Tell me, are you considered a sycophant? The Empress found it a little funny. If Your Majesty is an incapable ruler, I will be a sycophant. If Your Majesty is a wise ruler, I will be a capable one. Rinpoche laughed. After sitting with the Empress for 2 hours, Rinpoche left in a hurry. He sent someone to inform Tongxingye that he would go to the Ministry of Works tomorrow. He had to meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. Over the past few months, the rearguard commandery had doubled in size. The number of tiki at the bottom level had increased from 2,000 to 4,000, and the number of non-staff, called strongmen, had increased from 8,000 to 16,000. This meant that there were now a total of 4 qianhu in the rearguard commandery. Of the original 2 qianhu, one was in Tianjing Basin, and the other was in the Yun Nation. The 2 newly expanded qianhu would undergo another 3 months of training. After that, one would be sent to the Yun Nation, and the other to Great Xia. The team sent to Great Xia was mainly to investigate the whereabouts of the world's experts, as well as some ancient tombs. According to the traces of the human race after crossing the 60,000 mountains, other than the aboriginals who stayed in the mountains, the rest should have gone in 2 different directions. One of them was in the direction of the Chen Nation, while the majority of the human race went to Great Xia to reproduce. In other words, if that group of people left something in the tombs, it would also be in Great Xia. Moreover, ancient tombs had been occasionally discovered, and each time, some practitioners and even the imperial court would fight for them. The locations were all in Great Xia. Chapter 885. After Qi Jieyu left the villa, she cried bitterly when she got home. She used to think that the scariest thing in life was to fail at everything, to live with daily necessities and all kinds of trivial things in life. She was not even 40 years old, and she didn't even dare to show up at her classmates' gatherings, for fear that others would ask her how she was doing. For a long time after graduation, she felt that she was very lucky. Of course, it was also because of her hard work and talent. However, those days were like a bubble that was burst. She didn't know whether she should hate the person who exposed all of this. Maybe she didn't know anything, and she would have lived a good life. However, when she found out that she was living in a fake world, she didn't know how much of what she did, saw, and came into contact with was real, and how much was fake. Such a discovery almost drove her crazy. It turned out that the scariest thing was to live in front of a curtain, like the world of the Truman Show. During that time, she watched the Truman Show's world over and over again, and every time she watched it, she would cry bitterly. Fortunately, it was finally all over. She was just a substitute, or it could be said that it was only because she was very similar to someone. Since she couldn't make that person let go of her, then she had to find another way. She had to get in touch with him, understand him, and then take revenge on him. Although she was just a substitute could also kill people. The face of the woman she had seen in the past was already blurred in her mind, but she looked very similar to her. The only thing that left a deep impression was that the woman was like a god on an iceberg, looking down coldly. She was ice, so she had to be fire. Only in this way, the complete opposite of her, would she have a chance. In fact, before going to that person, she had prepared herself and began to learn. to learn all the ways a woman could attract a man. At the same time, she used all methods to collect information about that person. However, to her surprise, there was very little information about that person, and she couldn't find him on the internet. In this online world, such a thing was almost impossible. If it was an unknown ordinary person, it might be possible. But to live in the real world of the Truman Show and control everything about her, including her clients and her company, how much power did it take? This could only mean that the other party's influence was greater than she thought. After understanding this, her heart was filled with anticipation for the future. There was nothing more delightful than seeing such a person fall in the hands of a doll. After returning from that man's house, she racked her brains every day on how to dress herself up. Although it was only light makeup, not many men like to wear heavy makeup. But for every piece of clothing, the matching accessories, the details of her hairstyle, and the color of her nails, she had to think about it for a long time almost every day. She originally thought that the other party would come in a few days, but she didn't expect that after a few days, she would end up disappointed every day. The feeling of waiting for a strange man made her feel weird. She even felt like a commodity. A few days, 1 month, 3 months, half a year. She thought it would take a few days, but she didn't expect to see no trace of him after waiting for half a year. Her imagination ran wild every day, causing her to gradually sink into despair. Did he have no value at all in the other party's eyes? Even this toy couldn't make him look away? Those things that made her unable to sleep at night, the unbearable pain, and the determination. Everything seemed so futile and ridiculous. It was just her imagination and a one-woman show. She was still an actress in front of the curtain, showing off everything she had, and being watched and laughed by people below the stage. 7 months passed. At night, Chijayu put on light makeup and carefully painted her nails, just like she had been doing for the past few months. She put on a clean set of clothes and walked up to the rooftop. She thought of filling the bathtub with hot water, and then putting all her blood in it. That way it wouldn't be cold. She also thought of using charcoal. But in the end, she still chose this tragic way of dying. If I fall face down, I won't be able to see my face at all. This is also quite good. Chijayu thought to herself, and looked up at the night sky. There were almost no stars at night in this city. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, Chijayu looked down at everything that was shrinking under her feet. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then fell forward. However, the feeling of weightlessness only lasted for a moment before it stopped abruptly. Then, she felt the world spin around her, and her body was thrown back to the rooftop. At that moment, someone rushed over, grabbed her arm, and threw her back. Busybody. Chijayu thought to herself. However, when she looked up and saw the figure in front of her, she was stunned. His back was much wider than an ordinary person's. Even on a night like this, she could feel the explosive power of his body. Of course, this wasn't what attracted her. Instead, it was the bald head that emitted light at night. The brightness was about 60 lux, which was equivalent to the brightness of a 12-watt incandescent lamp. He turned around, walked to Chijayu, squatted down, and pinched her chin to carefully look at her. After a while, he let go of her hand and stood up. In fact, he knew that her mental condition was unstable a few days ago. However, due to the time shift, his concept of time was different from hers. To her, 7 months had passed, but to him it was only a little more than 3 months. Today, he took the time to settle some matters and came back to deal with her. He didn't expect to make it just in time. If he didn't know that she couldn't discover his whereabouts, he would have thought that she was deliberately doing this for him to see. "You're fired." Renbachian looked down at her and said faintly. Chijayu looked at him blankly. In fact, when she saw Renbachian, she threw all her previous plans to the back of her mind. In addition to nervousness, she was at a loss, resentment, and an indescribable mix of emotions. "You're fired. Prepare to find a new job tomorrow. Go to the place you want to go." Renbachian thought that he would see an ecstatic expression on her face, but it wasn't the case. She seemed to understand what he meant. At first she was puzzled, disappointed, and then couldn't hide her anger. "Isn't this what you want?" "Judging from your expression, it doesn't seem to be the case." Renbachian looked down at her. Well, he really couldn't bring himself to like her. Mainly because the Empress's divine sense was constantly affecting him and emitting a murderous aura. Should I be deeply grateful? Qi Jiayu was also very surprised. After hearing the news, she felt indignant and resentful. She had thought so much and prepared so much, but the other party simply said, "You're fired." If that was the case, why didn't you say that the last time? If you said that the last time, I would have been very happy to find a new life. Since that was the case, why did you make me wait and prepare for 7 months before getting this result? Since you didn't want to let me go, why did you let me go after thinking for 7 months? However, with that one sentence, everything he had thought, done, and prepared was all gone. His revenge ended before it could even begin. 9 years of his youth had been buried in a void of lies just like that. Although I already knew that I'm just a toy with the same face to the other party, when it really comes to this, I have nothing but anger in my heart. Renbachian was puzzled, but he didn't want to get involved anymore. Since this matter was over, he turned around and left. Chapter 886. Renbachian turned his head when he heard the sound, and saw the figure leaping into the air. Renbachian frowned, and felt a little angry. You're going to die in front of me after I let you go? Renbachian stomped on the rooftop and moved more than 10 meters away, appearing on the parapet wall. It was 18 stories, more than 60 meters high. Even if he didn't die from the fall, he would be seriously injured. Damn it! This was the only thought that flashed through Renbachian's mind as he stepped on the wall and rushed down. The feeling of weightlessness enveloped Qi Jiayu's body, and her resentful face became calm. She only had a few seconds left in her life. She tried her best to turn her body and neck to see if that unexpected face would appear above her. However, she saw a scene that she never expected. A figure stepped on the vertical wall and rushed toward her. That big bald head was still shining under the starlight. Why? Qi Jiayu moved her lips. At this height, even if it was a human realm expert, he would still die. Even though she knew that the person in front of her was very powerful, she couldn't tell the difference between him and a man-level expert. In her opinion, even if he didn't die, he would still be in great danger. Why did the other party rush down? It only took 3 seconds to fall from more than 60 meters. Renbachian's fastest speed was 1.5 seconds to cover 100 meters. Renbachian stared at the ground that was getting closer and closer, and his heart beat faster and faster. It wasn't fear, but an inexplicable pleasure. This kind of pleasure made him almost forget what he had jumped down for. Fortunately, when he was more than 10 meters away from the ground, he was finally parallel to Qi Jiayu. He grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. Before he landed, he pushed her up again and adjusted his landing angle. In just 3 seconds, Renbachian did what most people would take a minute to do. Bang! The moment Renbachian landed, he felt a strong recoil from the soles of his feet. His muscles bulged, and his clothes burst open. Then he felt a sharp pain from his legs, hip bone, and spine. Even though he had practiced the yang boosting technique, his body couldn't withstand such an impact. The only thing he was thankful for was the flower bed below. He was like a nail that was hammered into the ground by nearly 1 meter. After the sound of his landing, there was another sound of objects falling on the car roof and windows shattering. Damn it! Renbachian's face was full of anger. He wanted to pull himself up from the ground, but he couldn't exert any strength in his legs and hip bone. He reckoned that they were broken. Fortunately, his spine was fine. Damn it, B*TCH, I'm also F*King crazy. Renbachian had nowhere to vent his anger. His lower body was in severe pain and he couldn't move. He could only curse and vent his anger at himself at the same time. But scolding was just scolding. He really couldn't let her die like this. Furthermore, the Empress was pregnant with another one. If she were to die, what if the Empress's strength increased exponentially? Will it affect the fetus? Even if it wasn't affected, given the Empress's condition, she could turn into longevity heaven at any time. How could she continue living like this? If the Cardinal Heaven experts had to give their all, then the longevity heaven experts could only die. He had thought that if he released her, she would be able to start a new life. He didn't expect that he would seek his own death. If he was going to die, so be it. Why did he have to create so much trouble for himself? Following the sound of Ren Baqian getting up and walking, Qi Jiayu squatted down in front of him. Looking at him, who was half buried in the ground, Qi Jiayu didn't know what kind of expression to make. Why? Qi Jiayu finally asked. At this time, Qi Jiayu's head was bleeding, and her clothes were torn. However, Ren Baqian threw her up to cushion most of the impact before throwing her onto the roof of the car. She looked battered, but her condition was much better than Ren Baqian's. Slut! Ren Baqian didn't have any intention of communicating with her, and just wanted to curse. Why did you save me? Slut! I will get someone to capture you and lock you in a cage later. I have never seen anyone risk their life for a toy. Qi Jiayu stared at Ren Baqian's eyes, trying to see what he was thinking. Get lost. Ren Baqian was flustered and exasperated. I thought I was going to die. For a moment, I thought you would die too, Qi Jiayu slowly said. At that moment, I actually didn't feel happy. At that moment, her eyes were filled with the bald man who rushed down from the roof by stepping on the vertical wall. Are you King going to get lost or not? Ren Baqian cursed as he pressed his hands against the ground and tried to push himself up. Damn it, he didn't bring the winged cavalry with him this time. However, he brought another person, his new secretary, who had the same background as Shen Feng. And now, that person was still waiting for him on the other side of the building. Who the CK would have thought that such a thing would happen? Qi Jiayu was silent for a moment. She watched Ren Baqian pull himself out of the ground and asked, Do you want to provide for me? This time, it was Ren Baqian's turn to be stunned. Are you out of your mind? Qi Jiayu walked behind Ren Baqian and wanted to hug his chest with her hands. Perhaps she wanted to help him pull himself out, or perhaps she had other ideas. Ren Baqian waved his hand and threw her 3 to 4 meters away. She only stopped when she hit a car. Stay away from me. Next time if you want to die, stay away, Ren Baqian said fiercely. He didn't know what kind of expression he should have and subconsciously used this expression. Qi Jiayu sat on the ground. Her skirt was already dirty and torn. She sat there and stared at Ren Baqian. Someone will be here soon. When that time comes, they will call an ambulance. Looking at your appearance, you probably won't die. You knew that yourself, so you dared to rush down. However, it's different for me. I will go back to work tomorrow. Come and see me when you have the chance. Qi Jiayu didn't try to get close to Ren Baqian, and just sat there. I have said that I don't need you. Get lost. Don't let me see you again. The veins on Ren Baqian's forehead bulged. He felt like his brain was about to explode. How did things turn out like this? Also, was this woman crazy? I will still work there. After all, I am familiar with everything there. Otherwise, I will have to look for you. Why don't you kill me? The corners of Qi Jiayu's mouth curled up, making Ren Baqian even angrier. While they were talking, someone rushed over from a distance. Although it was the middle of the night, the noise still alarmed many people. Remember, come and see me when you have the time, Qi Jiayu said to Ren Baqian seriously. She then helped herself up from the car, pushed away the people who rushed over to help her, and limped toward the building. Ren Baqian was left there, not knowing what kind of expression to make. Qi Jiayu avoided the alarmed people, sat down in a dark corner, and then went into a daze. When the ambulance came and took Ren Baqian away, she sat there paralyzed as if she had lost all her strength. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Chapter 887. Wuxia City. Ren Baqian stood in front of the window and looked down at this unique city. The city was deserted, but it was gradually becoming more lively. It had been more than a month since his first visit, and the number of people on the streets seemed to have increased. The most direct observation was that there were 9 people sitting on top of a bus that just passed by. The last time he saw it, there were at most 7 people. His injuries from 2 days ago had mostly recovered, and he could at least walk on his own. Black mud cream and bone healing cream were always available in the palace and on Earth. These medicines were very expensive for ordinary people, but they weren't a big deal for him. Behind him was a frosty lady who was as androgynous as Shen Feng. If it weren't for her long hair and more developed chest muscles than Renbachian's, he could even see her as a man. Renbachian had to admit that some people could always arrange such an assistant to be by his side. At the very least, there was nothing to question about her resume and ability. However, it had to be said that such an assistant was the safest. If he were to get a beautiful one, Renbachian couldn't guarantee that she would live for more than half a year. The Empress was sometimes magnanimous, but at other times, she was also very jealous. Especially after watching so many TV series. It had to be said that TV series were the root of all evil. This time, the assistant's name wasn't androgynous and didn't match her appearance at all. Lin Xiaoyu. She's back at work. She seems to be in a much better state than before. Lin Xiaoyu's voice was a little hoarse. It seemed like she had been selected from her appearance to her voice. As she spoke, Lin Xiaoyu looked at Renbachian's back with a little curiosity in her eyes. She knew about Qi Jiayu as Shenfeng had told her about it. As for how they both ended up jumping off a building, she didn't know. However, the hole that Renbachian smashed gave her a shock. Although it was a flower bed, it was more than half a meter in, and only his legs and hip bones were fractured. This was quite shocking. One had to know that it was 68 meters tall. She was also curious as to why Renbachian jumped down from there. Just to save that woman? That was surprising to him. From the information she received before coming here, this person in front of her didn't hesitate to kill people. Got it. You can go now, Renbachian said without turning his head. Should we withdraw the people from the past? Lin Xiaoyu asked with a bit of selfishness. However, Renbachian didn't care and simply said, withdraw a portion of them and ensure that she's alive. Let her do as she pleases. After Lin Xiaoyu left, Renbachian rubbed his eyebrows. After going around in a big circle, everything had returned to normal. Forget it, if she wants to stay there, then so be it. When Renbachian returned to Dayo, the Empress revealed a puzzled look the moment she saw him. After scrutinizing him for a while, she frowned and asked, what happened? I found something fun. Renbachian smiled. Bungee jumping, Your Majesty, have you heard of it? The Empress's expression softened a little, and she said with some disdain, boring thing. Naturally, she knew about bungee jumping, which was to tie a rope and jump down from a high place. The problem was that she wouldn't die even if she jumped down, so why would she think that tying a rope to her feet would be fun? To her, it was even worse than bumper cars. At least there was some skill involved in bumping cars. I don't know if I can build a platform that's 150 meters high outside the city. Renbachian was eager to give it a try. When he jumped down from the rooftop that day, the excitement of weightlessness and acceleration was pretty cool. If he hadn't sped down and thrown Qi Jiayu when he was a few meters away from the ground, he wouldn't have suffered such serious injuries. He estimated that jumping down from about 100 meters would be the same injuries he sustained. As for a height of 150 meters, it would be dangerous for an Earthwill expert unless he had specialized in leaping skills. Boring. The Empress curled her lips and ignored him. Renbachian spread his hands. The Empress wasn't interested, but he was. He hadn't thought about this before, but this time he suddenly felt that it was quite fun. In addition to bungee jumping, there were also parachuting and hang gliding. He should try them when he had the chance. However, he didn't have the time to build a bungee jumping platform for the time being. The most important thing now was the Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute. Now that he hadn't even used the steam train, it seemed like a big leap to research the internal combustion engine. However, the first gas internal combustion engine was manufactured in 1860, and the first four-stroke internal combustion engine appeared in 1872. Without Renbachian, someone would probably find a way to reduce the size of the steam engine in 10, 20, or 30 years. However, he couldn't wait that long. With the current manufacturing level, it was completely achievable. The only thing missing was someone proposing this direction. Moreover, the biggest problem limiting the internal combustion engine was fuel, which had been solved long ago. Now the first batch of sunflowers was about to mature. In 2 months, the first batch of peanuts would mature as well. Renbachian was going to use biodiesel as the basis for this world's fuel. The next day, A separate small courtyard not far from the school's backyard was officially opened. This was the so-called Internal Combustion Engine Research Center. Every day, in addition to a specific group of craftsmen, there was also a group of senior students in the 4th grade. Graduation in 3 years had been delayed to 3.5 years. This internal combustion engine would be their graduation thesis. In addition to being busy with various matters, Renbachian also took the time to make a batch of behind-the-scenes footage. This group of simple-minded students had done a lot of the simple-minded things they had done over the past few years, and he had conveniently filmed a lot of them. He was going to show it to them when they graduated. Such a public execution would definitely be a lifelong memory for them. The first movie in Daeyo was made up of the black spots of these silly students. Hey, where's that Ning fellow? Renbachian had just finished his lecture and returned to his office when someone blocked the door. The smell of roasted sweet potatoes drifted in. Oh, you're still thinking about him? I couldn't tell. You're old but young at heart. Renbachian teased. Nonsense. Do you think I don't know that he's a man? Then he made him look neither human nor ghost. Li Fu cursed while gnawing on the sweet potato. Then why are you still looking for him? Nonsense. He still owes me money. Li Fu rolled his eyes. I only look for him when I need it. Who would have thought that he would suddenly disappear? How much do you need? Renbachian asked with a smile. 30 taels of silver. Li Fu gestured with his fingers. This was the money from their business partnership. He had expended a lot of effort while that fellow sold a few iron trousers. In the end, he actually ran away with the money. It was really hateful. Tise. Renbachian exclaimed in admiration. This world's #1 expert was really down to earth for a few dozen taels of silver. Who would believe this? However, Li Fu never had the awareness of being the world's #1 expert. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kicked people's testicles every day. You won't be able to get this money back. He won't be coming back, Renbachian said leisurely. However, I have a good job for you. Do you want to hear about it? Not interested. Li Fu refused without even listening. He was the world's #1 expert. If he wanted to make money, people would come to his door as long as he opened his mouth. He wasn't interested in doing anything for Renbachian. As for the 30 taels of silver, it was different. This was his hard-earned money. About the origin of the human race, the causes and consequences, and another vast world. Renbachian said leisurely. Oh, you mean those monsters, right? Li Fu sneered with a look of indifference. You know about them? Renbachian was a little surprised. Chapter 888. Renbachian had to admit that it made sense for an old man to say that he had eaten more salt than he had eaten rice. This was especially true for people like Li Fu. He had traveled all over the world for 200 years, and had been to countless dangerous places, so he definitely knew more than ordinary people. Although the person from back then didn't leave a word or two due to the agreement, many people bypassed that agreement and left some words before they died. The person in the underground palace clearly wrote that the humans were driven here. Although there was no mention of the foreign races, Renbachian reckoned that the things he left behind actually violated the agreement. The humans weren't allowed to record some of the information he obtained from the herdsmen. As for what would happen if they violated the agreement, if this was on Earth, Renbachian would definitely say that he would die with his head held high. However, in this world it was hard to say. However, considering his situation, he died with hatred while being driven here. One could imagine the resentment in his heart, so it was understandable that he left behind these things. However, other people might not have been able to leave so many things behind. How much do you know? Renbachian looked at Li Fu and asked. I know everything I need to know. Back then, I accidentally dug up a few ancient tombs and left behind a few words. Everyone left scattered records. And at that time, I felt that the key parts were missing. Every few words were missing, and there were other clues left behind. I thought that I would find good things if I continued to search, and spent more than 20 years looking for them. I didn't expect to put them together in the end to be like this. Li Fu said resentfully. If it weren't for this, do you think I would have come here with you? In my opinion, you are all humans. However, in the eyes of others, you are the foreign races. Accidentally? Ren Baqian laughed. I can't tell. Look at your thick eyebrows and big eyes. However, what Li Fu said was quite interesting. It seemed that the entire record was broken up by a few people and separated by a few words. If one only looked at one of them, they wouldn't be able to understand what was being said. However, if they were put together, they could be pieced together. This was a more primitive method of keeping secrets, but it was relatively crude. After all, they wanted later generations to figure out what happened. Since the purpose was different, the method was naturally shallow. Pfft, who hasn't been young before? Li Fu spat with a dissatisfied expression. It seemed like he was regretting that he had wasted more than 20 years just to find these things. Can you tell me what's written? Ren Baqian asked. Li Fu was silent for a moment, his expression uncertain. Finally, he sighed and said, Now that you know about this, don't tell me you want to go back. Let me tell you, 100 years ago, I had the same idea. But now this idea was gone. This was the barren land. The human race had multiplied here for thousands of years. It seemed prosperous, but in fact it had declined by more than a little. The people who left their graves all those years ago understood this. All the records were put together, and there were 3 words at the end. Don't look back. If we go back, those outsiders will definitely attack us with all their strength. The human race no longer has the experts they once had. How can we resist them? This was a calamity for the human race. This is the reason why I haven't entered the 60,000 mountains for the past 100 years. However, as my lifespan is nearing its end, I decided to go there to take a look. If I can't find a way to ascend to heaven, then I'll wait until my lifespan ends before I find a cave in the 60,000 mountains and end my life there. I don't dare to go because I'm afraid of causing trouble for the human race. With my strength, I'm already the best in the world, but I couldn't even compare to the generals under the emperor back then. Back then, the human race was more than 100 times more powerful than it is now. There were countless experts, and I had at least 8,000 of them, but what happened in the end? Even the human sovereign has fallen. Do you really think that no one has discovered these things all these years? It's just that the people who discovered it kept it to themselves, and didn't dare to say it out loud. Ren Baqian looked at Li Fu and didn't expect him to be like this. He didn't expect him to have such thoughts. However, Li Fu was right. How could no one have discovered it after so many years? Was he smart? Was he lucky? For thousands of years, there were many intelligent people in the world. They didn't dare to go. However, Ren Baqian was different from them. They didn't dare to go, but he did. What they were worried about was nothing more than the strength of the outsiders. Fighting here depended on which side had more people and more experts. Their worries were right. The Earthwheel experts that Ren Baqian saw in that illusion were just soldiers. Now the Empress's 1,500 winged cavalry warriors were enough to make the whole world afraid, and 10,000 of them could wipe out the 3 nations of Great Xia. However, 10,000 Earthwheel experts were nothing in the past. Therefore they didn't dare to. However, Ren Baqian dared to. As long as the other party dared to gather an army, Big Ivan would teach them a lesson. There was no need to worry about the other party's intermediate and low-end forces. Even if a Cardinal Heaven expert could escape the explosion of a 10,000-ton miniature nuclear bomb, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape a 10,000-ton nuclear bomb. If that wasn't enough, there was still a 100,000-ton nuclear bomb. At most, the other side of the 60,000 mountains would be covered in mosaic and fall apart. Of course, that would be a method of mutual destruction. Ren Baqian was still hoping to go to that land, break through to the spirit will level, break through to the heaven and earth region, and live for 800 to 1,000 years. He lacked nuclear bombs now, but there would always be a way to solve this problem. Therefore, what he lacked the most now was power that could grow into a high-end force. Ren Baqian knew that it was useless to persuade Li Fu with words. It was time to let Li Fu see the effects of nuclear weapons. This was much more useful than words. I'll show you something in 7 days. I'm sure you will have a new idea. Li Fu looked at him, shook his head and said, You probably don't know that when one's strength reaches a certain level, all external things are a joke. In some ways you're right. However, what you're afraid of is that they have the strength to wipe out the human race. If I show them that I have the strength to wipe them out, would they dare? Runbachian chuckled. Of course they wouldn't dare. If nuclear bombs plowed that land, apart from those top experts, the ordinary people of the foreign races wouldn't be able to survive. Would they be able to create another race? However, it was impossible to rely on this method to allow the human race to occupy a place in that world. Nuclear bombs could only be used as a weapon of destruction, and not as a weapon of deterrence. Otherwise, they would have to spend a few years or decades to fully understand the situation of nuclear bombs, or simply destroy them. At that time, the human race wouldn't even have a place to run. Therefore, the purpose of this thing was to directly plow over after the war started and bomb wherever there were many people. Li Fu carefully stared at Rinpochian for a long time before asking, "Are you dreaming?" "You will know in a few days. I can also give a lesson to the students at the academy. I want to see what you can come up with," Li Fu said with a strange look on his face before disappearing in a flash. Rinpochian leaned back in his chair and touched his chin. He currently had a miniature warhead with a yield of 200 tons. However, this thing could scare others, but it wasn't enough to scare Li Fu. It was best to make it more intuitive and give people confidence immediately after seeing it. If the power wasn't enough, he could make up for it with the yield. With his strength of more than 1,000 kilograms, he should be able to bring back a warhead with a yield of 10,000 tons, right? Chapter 889. What are you looking for? You have been gesticulating nonstop since you came back. The Empress held the roaring emperor with one hand and picked up a fruit with the other, throwing it at Rinpochian, who was gesticulating on the map. Other people held their pets, but the Empress held them by their necks. The roaring emperor seemed to be enjoying it. "I brought back a big guy this time." Rinpochian looked back at her, and continued to look at the map. "Oh, didn't you say that before?" The Empress let go of the roaring emperor, and it rolled on the ground. It then rubbed itself against her feet, trying to dig a hole. This was a subconscious action. A mole that didn't dig a hole was like a monkey that didn't climb a tree. However, the Empress was quick enough to kick it aside. "If you dig another hole, tomorrow's dinner will be yours." The roaring emperor quickly ran away. "That's why I have to find a place to blow it up. It doesn't feel safe to keep this thing around. However, it's not easy to find this place." "Can it blow up Lan City?" the Empress asked curiously. She had been curious about the power of nuclear bombs ever since she saw a documentary on Earth. However, she had only seen the 2 miniature nuclear bombs that Rinpochian threw, which were powerful enough to blow up half of the palace. Therefore, she was very curious about the size of the big guy that Rinpochian was talking about. "I'm afraid that 4 Lan cities will be blown up." Rinpochian laughed bitterly. He didn't expect the country to be so ruthless. The last 3 were miniature nuclear warheads, but this time, they actually got him a real deterrent nuclear warhead. The reason was that it was about to expire. Of course, that wasn't what they said at the time. The veins on Rinpochian's forehead bulged when he thought of this reason. F***ck, they gave me a nuclear warhead that was about to expire? Moreover, it was said that there were quite a lot of them. Since destroying them was destroying them, they gave him one on account of his honesty. He had to admit that the big shots this time were really bold. 475,000 tons. The 2 nuclear warheads that the United States threw at him added up to about 30,000 tons. The one that he was holding now was 15 times the size of those 2. Not to mention using it to scare Li Fu, it was enough to scare himself. More importantly, this thing was about to expire, and there was no telling if there would be any problems. Alright, that was quite a long time. Half a year. And he was prepared to pung it in the next few days. However, it wasn't that easy to trick Peng. First, he had to find a deserted place. It would be best if there were only a few living animals. He didn't want to create any monsters due to radiation contamination. It would be easier to deal with Godzilla, as any Cardinal Heaven expert could easily kill it. That thing was just a little brother. However, the dire beasts in this world were powerful to begin with. If they were to mutate, it would be troublesome. For example, the 2 bombs in the 60,000 mountains were relatively weak. Moreover, he had ordered people to keep a close watch on the area and forbid any ferocious beasts from roaming about. Therefore, there shouldn't be any major problems. But this time it was really too big. In addition to being deserted, it also has to be large enough. The best would be a desert, but there were no deserts in Dayo. He couldn't bear to blow up the grasslands and pastures. The Empress was shocked to hear that 4 of Lan's cities had been destroyed. She asked incredulously, "It's actually that powerful? We do not dare to casually hand over such a thing to others." "I didn't expect it either." Runbachian smiled bitterly. He originally thought that a bomb with a yield of 10,000 tons would be enough. The radius of the direct destruction would be 1 kilometer, and the area of destruction would be 4 square kilometers. Of course, the impact area would be larger, reaching 10 square kilometers. The radius of the direct destruction of this 475,000-ton warhead would reach 5 kilometers, which was 25 square kilometers. In other words, the high light and heat during the explosion would directly ignite everything in this area. The impact area would be even larger. Needless to say, the radiation range would be dozens of times larger, so Runbachian had to be cautious. Runbachian looked at the map for a long time and drew circles in a few places. He then sat back at the table and began to write a letter. "Li Yuanju?" The Empress came over to take a look, and her face immediately turned ugly. It would be a waste not to bring more people to watch such a big nuclear bomb, Runbachian said without looking up. Among the top 10 experts in the world, the second most powerful expert, Su Wuming, has been in hiding for a long time. He has always been secretive and unpredictable. Forget about this kind of person. Li Yuanju is the third most powerful expert in the world, a rather decent person, and can be used. If she takes the lead, a lot of things will be easier to handle. The fourth most powerful expert is you, Your Majesty. The fifth most powerful expert is Jiang Zixi, who used to be the sixth most powerful expert in the world. This person has a good reputation, and I will also send someone to invite him. However, he is the chief of the Huabing Sword House, so I may not be able to invite him. The sixth most powerful expert is Hong Wu, and the 7th to 10th are all thanks to Your Majesty. Runbachian laughed at this point. The Empress had killed many experts in the past few years. The fourth most powerful expert in the world, Tung Yu, the fifth most powerful expert, Hua Sanlu, the 7th most powerful expert, Lu Pinghai, and the Zhumu elders, who were killed by the Empress when they were just promoted to the 10th most powerful expert in the world. Although the embroidered uniform guards from the rearguard commandery hadn't been sent out yet, there was no need to collect information on these top experts. They could easily find out by asking. The 7th most powerful expert is Tong Yen, who used to be the 12th most powerful expert in the world. He is a treacherous person and can't be used. The 8th most powerful expert is Ma Hongyu, who used to be the 14th most powerful expert in the world. Although he isn't good or evil, he is famous for keeping his promises. Although he has a villa, it will be easier to invite him than Jiang Zixi. The 9th most powerful expert is Su Gongso, an elder of the Moon Palm sect. He is known as the Sun, Moon and Heaven and Earth Palm, and has a decent reputation. The 10th most powerful expert is Lin Dong, the chief of Zhengtian sect. This sect is called Zhengtian, but it specializes in evil practices and has a bad reputation. However, this Lin Dong, although he is irritable and bloodthirsty, he is a man of his word. I can get in touch with him. None of these people are easy to invite. In what name? The Empress curled her lips. In the name of the world's most powerful expert, Li Fu, of course. Just say that the secret residence of a deity from ancient times is about to appear. He can't handle it alone, so he is inviting everyone to help him. After it is opened, the treasures inside will be obtained by those who are fated. Runbachian had read a lot of Xianxia novels back then, so he had a lot of such plots in his mind. If someone else had said this, those people might not have taken it seriously. However, if Li Fu said this, most of them would probably come and take a look. If they find out that they have been deceived, I won't be able to stop them by myself. When the time comes, a nuclear bomb will open the way, and everyone will probably be able to sit down and have a good talk. Renbaqian wasn't worried at all. However, this isn't what you wrote in this letter. The Empress looked at it and raised her eyebrows again. Li Yuanzhu is too indifferent. Fame and fortune can't move her. Previously, when a secret treasure appeared near her mountain, she didn't do anything. For such a person, you have to persuade her with righteousness. Renbaqian laughed. On the paper he wrote, "The human race is in danger. The foreign races are making a comeback with great power and are unstoppable. We will discuss this matter in Lan City in 2 months. Signed Li Fu." The letter to Li Yuanzhu was to ask her to come to Lan City. After convincing her, he could rely on her and the Empress to suppress the others. The letter to the others was to tell them where he was going to detonate the nuclear bomb. His handwriting is really ugly, the Empress commented. That's right. With Li Fu's background, I don't believe that his handwriting is good-looking. Renbaqian laughed. Besides, no one would have thought that someone would dare to impersonate Li Fu with such ugly handwriting, right? That's why it's so believable. The next day, when Li Fu heard that Renbaqian had changed the time to 2.5 months later, he sneered and said, "You usually have a glib tongue, but you can't take it out now, can you? We will know in 2.5 months. Renbaqian didn't care at all and chuckled. Chapter 890. The Genuine One sect was originally an inconspicuous small sect, but ever since Li Yuanzhu appeared, its doorstep had been broken by people every day. There were many people who wanted to see Li Yuanzhu, but very few were able to see her. On this day, a fast horse stopped at the foot of Bamboo Mountain. A young man with a broad forehead dismounted from the horse and placed it in the pit. This pit had long been in place for fear that someone would ride a horse up the mountain and startle the pilgrims. However, before Li Yuanzhu was born, who would care about this? Now, how many people dared to ride a horse? There was a Taoist temple on the mountain that wasn't considered big. Compared to the third most powerful sect in the world, it could be said to be shabby. However, there were many pilgrims and even more people who wanted to learn from the temple. The young man sized it up and set his eyes on a 16 or 17-year-old Taoist who was standing in front of the door not far away. "Fellow Taoist, I have a letter to deliver to spiritual master Li Yuanzhu. Please pass on the message," the young man said politely and with proper etiquette. Although Li Yuanzhu was dressed as a Taoist nun, she wasn't really a monk. However, the young man still addressed her as spiritual master. "I don't know your name. Just pass the letter to me." The little Taoist smiled. He muttered in his heart. Every day, there were countless people who wanted to see Marshal Granduncle and deliver letters to him. Although this was what he was thinking, he could tell from the little Taoist's attitude that Genuine One sect was good at disciplining its disciples. "My name isn't important, but the person who asked me to deliver this letter isn't ordinary. I dare not fake it. Fellow Taoist, please pass on the message that a person named Li Fu wants me to deliver a letter to spiritual master Li Yuanzhu." What a tacky name. The little Taoist muttered in his heart. He had never heard of such an expert. There were many people in this world who thought highly of themselves. In fact, outside of the surrounding villages, there were only a few who had heard of their names. Even if that person arrives at the palace, the emperor will personally welcome him. Whether it's true or not, you will know after you pass on the message. The young man seemed to know what he was thinking. In fact, the young man had also thought so. If he hadn't accepted this task, he wouldn't have heard of Li Fu. Even though the little Taoist felt that he was boasting a little too much, he could see the certainty in his words. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. He paid his respects and hurriedly went in to report. This young man was called Shi Jingtian, and he was one of the most talented disciples in the Lingshan sect in Tianjing Basin. At the age of 19, he had attained the Earth Will level and became Zhuocheng's personal disciple. More than half of the sects in Tianjing Basin had already been annihilated. The Lingshan sect was the leader of the 8 biggest sects in Tianjing Basin. In the past 2 years, it had recruited many disciples, and its strength had greatly increased. Now that the spiritual mountain sect and the rearguard commandery were tied together, they had even sent out such a disciple. After the little Taoist priest left, Shi Jingtian secretly observed the situation of the True One Temple. Li Yuanzhu was in the quiet room at the moment. In fact, she spent most of her time here. Everyone thought that she trained hard every day. Otherwise, how could she have become a top-notch expert in the world at the age of 20? However, she was peeling 7 leaves. They were only the size of a thumb and had a hard outer shell. After breaking them open, the red skin and white flesh were revealed. It was troublesome for ordinary people to eat these 7 leaves, but Li Yuanzhu could break them open with a gentle pinch without hurting the red skin at all. Just this skill alone was enough to make people cheer. At the moment, there was already a small pile of 7 leaves at the side, and in front of her was a small pile of separated nuts. She gently picked one up with her slender hand and put it in her mouth. There was a hint of joy on her delicate and indifferent face. At this moment, hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. The joy on Li Yuanzhu's face froze slightly. She brushed her hand on the couch, and the shells and nuts disappeared without a trace. "Senior sister, someone wants to send you a letter." He boasted that even the emperor will personally receive him when he reaches the palace. A young girl in her 20s who exuded a youthful aura pushed open the door and shouted. She then sniffed and asked with a suspicious look, "Senior sister, did you secretly eat again?" "Why would I?" Li Yuanzhu smiled. Ningqing's nose was getting better and better. Her innate talent was probably in her nose. She reprimanded gently. "You're not young anymore. Yet you're still so rash. What's the person's name?" "Don't change the topic. I can smell it. You know this nose of mine. Even a dog can't compare to me." Ningqing was certain that Li Yuanzhu had eaten secretly. "Senior sister, you're so cunning. The last time I asked you, you said you didn't have any. How dare you hide and eat secretly? What exactly are you doing here?" Li Yuanzhu asked helplessly. She couldn't help but think that Ningqing was probably the only one who could come up with such a strange metaphor. She had never thought that even a dog couldn't compare to her. Wasn't she scolding herself? "Oh, forget it. I'll let you off this time. If people find out that the 3rd most powerful expert in the world hides and eats secretly like a thief, they'll probably laugh their heads off." The young girl nagged for a long time before saying, "Someone sent a letter and said that it was sent by Li Fu. He also said that the emperor will personally welcome the owner of the letter when he arrives at the palace. Who is this Li Fu? Why haven't I heard of this name before?" Li Yuanzhu was stunned and looked a little surprised. "I've never had any contact with him. But if it's really him, I have to take a look at this letter. I just hope that it's not someone impersonating his name. Who exactly is this Li Fu? What an old-fashioned name." Ningqing was even more curious when she saw Li Yuanzhu's reaction. "The world's #1 expert. He's the only one with this name who can be personally welcomed by the emperor," Li Yuanzhu said faintly. "I've told you before." "Ah, so it's that person with the name XXX. Ningqing suddenly realized. Li Yuanzhu had a smile on her face. This matter was indeed interesting. The top 2 names in the list of world experts were replaced by XXX, and had always been treated as a joke. However, the real top experts had more or less heard of these 2 names. One was Li Fu. The other was much more impressive, sword maniac Su Wuming. He was a figure from hundreds of years ago, and had been in hiding for a long time. Not many people knew whether he was dead or alive. She didn't expect to receive a letter from Li Fu. "Bring him to the guest hall. I'll go after a while," Li Yuanzhu said slowly. After Ningqing left, Li Yuanzhu found a box in the quiet room, and put all the 7 leaves nuts into it. The box looked inconspicuous, but it was actually made of a type of wuchang wood. Its function was to keep the items inside for several months without rotting. It was extremely expensive. Such a small box cost more than 100 taels of gold, and it was usually used to store precious herbs. However, to Li Yuanzhu, this box was a snack box. Not only could it keep the food fresh, but it could also prevent Ningqing from finding it. Shi Jingtian was brought into the guest hall. He didn't look around and just stood there quietly. "Kid, what's your name? Is this letter really written by the world's #1 expert, Li Fu? Is he still alive? Where is he? Are you his disciple? Why did he write a letter to senior sister? Hey kid, say something." Don't tell me that the letter in your hand is fake? It doesn't make sense for him to suddenly appear and send a letter after disappearing for so long. Let me tell you, if it's fake, you better tell me quickly. Otherwise, when senior sister comes later, I won't let you off even if she doesn't say anything. A young girl sat at the head of the table and kept talking with a curious look on her face. Shi Jingtian pretended to look down and turned a deaf ear to her. You're not a mute, are you? Or are you looking down on me? Let me tell you, in our True One temple, senior sister is the eldest, the temple master is the second, and the martial uncles are the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The last one is me. Shi Jingtian continued to look down, but the back of his head was already sweating. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer, but he really didn't know where to start. Women are really scary. I was right to reject junior sister a few days ago. Studying and practicing martial arts are more important. Fortunately, after waiting for a while, someone finally came to his rescue. Chapter 891. Senior sister, you're here. This person is a mute. Someone actually sent a mute to deliver a letter. Ningqing immediately jumped up from her chair and scolded her. I'm afraid that a normal person would become mute in front of you. Li Yuanju said helplessly. Normal people tended to talk less as they aged. Ningqing was the opposite. Now that he thought about it, Ningqing was cuter when she was young. May I ask if you are perfected Li Yuanju? Shi Jingtian coughed lightly. In fact, when he first saw this girl, he was sure that she was exactly as the rumors said. He couldn't help but think. It would be great if all the women in the world were like her. At least it's not that annoying. I am. Please take a seat. How should I address you, young master? Li Yuanju's smile relaxed Shi Jingtian. This was the first time he was so relaxed in front of a woman. Usually, they feared it like a tiger. It just so happened that he was talented and good-looking. Who knew how many people gathered around him every day, causing him to be unable to bear it? I am Shi Jingtian. Shi Jingtian cupped his fists and bowed. He then took out a letter and said, This is the letter. So it's young Master Shi. You're young, but your cultivation level isn't low. Your talent is truly amazing. Li Yuanju praised. Shi Jingtian was startled. Ever since he had arrived at this Taoist temple, he had not revealed a single bit of his aura. He did not expect that the other party would be able to detect him. But thinking about it, this was to be expected. Even his master was not a match for this woman in her prime. Ningqing ran down, snatched the letter, and handed it over to her. Li Yuanju smiled and said, Who is the person who asked you to deliver the letter? What does it have to do with you? It's Prince Zhao. Shi Jingtian replied honestly. In fact, Renbaqian had already instructed him not to hide the fact that Li Fu was in Lan City. Furthermore, the meeting place in the letter was Lan City. If it was secretive, it would make people suspicious. Li Yuanju pondered for a moment, and was slightly surprised. So it's Zhao, Prince Consort of Dayo. Of that gigolo. Ningqing finally reacted. Ningqing. Li Yuanju pulled a long face, scaring Ningqing. She quickly said, I was just spouting nonsense. Don't mind me. Why is that senior in Dayo? What is he doing in Dayo? She asked slowly. I do not know. Once you read the letter, you will roughly know, Shi Jingtian said. She opened the letter and frowned after taking a glance at it. The content of the letter was rather strange. Outsiders? Make a comeback? Powerful? What does that mean? What an ugly handwriting. Ningqing couldn't help but say as she glanced at the back of the letter. This time, Li Yuanju didn't reprimand her. She wasn't concerned about the beauty or ugliness of the words, but the meaning behind them. In her eyes, every word turned into a towering mountain. The number of words on the letter represented the number of mountains. There's also the scent of a woman. Ningqing sniffled and said suspiciously, This letter was naturally written by the Empress. Every word of such an expert had its own spirit. No matter how similar Renbaqian's words were, an expert would be able to tell the truth with just one look. After the Empress raised this point, Renbaqian immediately thought of her. She felt that it was rather interesting to fool around with that woman, so she helped him. Although the Empress wasn't Li Fu, she was the fourth most powerful expert in the world and the Empress of a nation. She had her own spirit. If one hadn't seen their handwriting before, one would really think that it was written by the world's most powerful expert. It was only a few dozen words, but it took Li Yuanzhu 10 minutes to read before she put down the letter and praised. Good handwriting. Ning Qing was still surprised by the content of the letter, but her eyes widened when she heard this. Good handwriting. I told you to cultivate well, but you are too weak to see it. Li Yuanzhu shook her head and asked. Does young master sure know what the content of this letter means? I don't. Is that person in Lan City? Can you tell me about his current situation? Li Yuanzhu asked. The content of the letter made her feel strange, but it reminded her of something she had heard from Su Gongso. At that time, Su Gongso didn't explain it clearly, and in fact he didn't understand it either. However, the history of the human race contained a huge secret. When Li Yuanzhu saw this letter, she first confirmed that it was indeed written by Li Fu. There were probably only two people in the world who could write such words, Li Fu and Qi Zixiao. The latter disdained to do such a thing. In that case, it could only be Li Fu. It seemed that no matter what, she had to make a trip to the south to understand the situation. But before that, she still wanted to ask about Li Fu's current situation. Shi Jingtian hesitated for a while and said, I don't know much. Just tell me what you know. The whereabouts of the world's most powerful expert has been a mystery for a long time, so I'm still a little curious. Li Yuanzhu smiled. I know that he has a nickname, the balls-kicking maniac. What? What does that mean? Li Yuanzhu didn't quite understand. Shi Jingtian said. It is said that after he arrived in Lan City, many experts challenged him. No matter who it was, he kicked all of them in the crotch, so he got the nickname of the balls-kicking maniac. Pfft. Ning Qing spurted out. Li Yuanzhu's expression froze. Shi Jingtian's heart was filled with malice when he saw their expressions. He had experienced the feeling of having his idol destroyed before. Then he said in a carefree manner, it is said that he colluded with someone to sell iron crotches. If you buy iron crotches from that place and challenge him, he will kick you more gently. This is the world's most powerful expert? Are you kidding? Ning Qing's eyeballs almost popped out. Senior sister, this must be fake, right? Ning Qing couldn't believe that the world's most powerful expert was like this. Li Yuanzhu rubbed her forehead and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. According to the rumored character of that person, it's not impossible. That's all I know. Shi Jingtian was quite happy. Young Master Shi, are you from the Yun Nation or Tianjing Basin? Li Yuanzhu asked again. Tianjing Basin Lingshan sect. Oh, you're from the Lingshan sect. Li Yuanzhu nodded and asked. Are you working for the Dayo Imperial Court now? Yes. As a Baihu from the rearguard commandery, I've taken on the responsibility of delivering the letter, Shi Jingtian said truthfully. I see. Young Master Shi, please take a rest. I'll give you a reply after thinking about it, Li Yuanzhu said. After Shi Jingtian left, Ning Qing asked the question in her heart. Was it really written by Li Fu? What does this letter mean? What foreign races? Senior sister, do you know? I'm not sure, but since it's written by the world's most powerful expert, it must be true. No matter what, I have to make this trip. I'll go too. Ning Qing immediately jumped up and said excitedly, I'll go pack my luggage now. I've been bored on the mountain for a long time, and I can finally go out for a walk. Li Yuanzhu shook her head helplessly. If something really happens, I can still deliver a letter or something. Furthermore, you're the world's third most powerful expert. If you don't bring a few people with you, you'll lose your prestige. Although you don't care, you can't let others look down on you. Besides, with me, you'll have someone to talk to along the way. Ning Qing chattered. Li Yuanzhu smiled bitterly. With her talent, if she was willing to work hard, it wouldn't be a problem for her to reach the Earth Will level before the age of 20. However, with her jumpy personality, she couldn't settle down, and was only at the later stages of the Man Will level. Bringing her out to see the world this time might be able to sharpen her temper. Chapter 892. Let me ask you something. You and Su Wuming are both from 100 years ago. According to the lifespan of spirit wheel experts, there shouldn't be only 2 of you from 100 years ago, right? Why are the people on the list of experts from recent decades? Don't tell me that those from 100 years ago are useless. Renbaqian had nothing to do, so he dragged Li Fu to the barbecue rack. There was a row of people hanging 5 meters above the rack. Those who didn't know better would think that he was barbecuing people. The aroma of the barbecue and the smoke made the teenagers on the rack almost cry. Principal, will you let me down? I'll definitely pass next time. Zhu Hua vowed. Heh. Renbaqian's mouth twitched. Have you ever passed in these few years of school? Forget it. I don't have any expectations for you to pass. You can be a security guard after graduation. Li Fu mimicked Renbaqian, sprinkling seasoning on a large skewer of lamb and said, They are all dead. Renbaqian was shocked and turned to look at Li Fu. All dead? All the experts from that era are dead? How did they die? With a spirit wheel expert's lifespan of about 150 years, there weren't many experts from 100 years ago. There weren't even experts from 70 or 80 years ago. This made him curious. After so many years, it was normal for a few people to die because of fights, revenge, or other reasons. However, all of them were dead, which made this matter strange. Su Wuming killed them. Li Fu said faintly, It's him? Why? If he saw you, he would have killed you too. Li Fu added. Renbaqian furrowed his eyebrows. According to Li Fu, if they wanted to kill him upon seeing him, there could only be one reason. Could it be that those people were killed because they wanted to go out and take a look? Yes, Li Fu recalled. Back then, there were still many experts. When we discovered that information, some people couldn't help but contact other experts to go and take a look. Later, Su Wuming passed away. Was Su Wuming that strong? Renbaqian asked. I couldn't beat him back then, Li Fu said. He was seriously injured that time, and I don't know if he has recovered after so many years. However, I became the world's #1 expert. Renbaqian was silent for a while before laughing. Sword maniac? Ha. You don't know how terrifying that thing was. Li Fu shook his head. If you really want to go, I will stop you. Even if he had to gasp for breath here, it was still better than a bloody river. At that time, I'm afraid I won't be able to see anything in this world anymore. As the two of them spoke, the students above stopped making a ruckus. All of them pricked up their ears. I will show you something that will scare you to death in 1 month. Renbaqian sneered. Let's wait and see. Although Li Fu said so, he obviously didn't believe it. That's right, old man. I also called some people over. Li Yuanzhu and a few other experts. When the time comes, I'll let all of you watch a grand scene together. It has nothing to do with me. Li Fu did not care at all. Relationship? Still a little. Renbaqian chuckled. I invited him in your name. You won't be able to invite them. An expert will be able to tell if it's real or fake at a glance. Li Fu suddenly thought of something as he said this. He looked surprised. Could it be written by the little girl? She actually did such a thing? I'm her husband, and she's my wife. Renbaqian bragged. Isn't it just writing a letter? Heh. Li Fu sneered. Your Majesty, Invincible East is the only one. It's just the right time to capture them all in one fell swoop. Renbaqian said casually. I'm afraid that all of you will die. Li Fu obviously didn't believe this nonsense. The little girl was powerful, but she was talented. It was indeed rare for her to have such strength at such a young age. In a few more years, it wouldn't be impossible for her to surpass Renbaqian. However, it wasn't that there weren't people who were stronger than her now. At the very least, Li Yuanzhu wouldn't be weaker than her. With her blocking the Empress, even though there were many experts in Dayo, they wouldn't be able to stop the top experts. They might even take advantage of the situation and kill many of them. Why would the little girl do such an unwise thing? You will know when the time comes. Speaking of which, you really don't have any objections to me using your name? Renbaqian began to feel strange. This old man was too calm. If they come and I explain the matter to them, They can only blame themselves for being stupid. Can they still blame me for it? Li Fu sneered. How magnanimous. Ren Baqian gave a thumbs up and praised. I'm waiting to see what you'll do when the time comes. If you mess it up, you'll lose the face of the entire imperial court. That little girl won't let you off either. Li Fu sounded like he was waiting to watch a good show. Also, no matter what, be careful of Su Wuming. If he knows what you are thinking, the little girl won't be able to protect you. As for me, don't expect me to stop him for you. What's the point of going out if I can't even deal with him? I might as well go home and warm the Kong bed for my wife and children. Ren Baqian sneered. At the same time, Li Yuanzhu came down from the mountain with Ning Qing. Ning Qing immediately cheered as soon as she came down the mountain. We are finally out. I was so stifled. You better behave yourself and don't cause any trouble. Especially when we reach Dayo, the people there may not care about me. Li Yuanzhu reminded her. How dare they? Qi Zixiao is the fourth most powerful expert in the world. You are even more powerful than her. Other than those two old fellows, no one in the world is your match. Ning Qing immediately jumped up. Li Yuanzhu shook her head and made up her mind to keep an eye on Ning Qing along the way. Half a month after Li Yuanzhu set off, Ma Hongyu called a few disciples over and instructed, "Follow me out to do something. Go back and pack your bags. We will set off in 2 days. I'm afraid there will be a fight this time, so be careful. However, this is also an opportunity for you to hone yourselves." Su Gongso and Tong Yen both brought along a few experts from their sects, but their reactions were quite different. The former was rather enthusiastic because he might be able to obtain something useful for his breakthrough this time. On the other hand, Tong Yen was completely prepared to watch a good show. If there was an opportunity, he would certainly try to fish for it. If there wasn't, he would leave and become a stepping stone for others. More importantly, as the sect leader, he knew some things and was indifferent to breaking through. These experts set off one after another within half a month according to the distance. Their destination was a hilly area in the northwest of Dayo. On this day, 2 men dressed like scholars with long swords on their backs arrived at Lan City. The people here aren't very friendly. One of the men curled his lips as he looked at the passers-by on both sides of the road. Along the way, many Aboriginal men intentionally or unintentionally bent their arms to show off their pectorals and biceps. Their threatening intent was indescribable, not to mention their ferocious gazes. Fortunately, these people didn't come looking for trouble, so the two of them were spared some twists and turns. "Brotherling, be careful later on," the other man whispered. "Yes, we can still escape if we are under the control of others. If we are under the control of Qi Zixiao, I'm afraid we won't even be able to escape. Let's do what we have to do," the other man said. "I'm not worried about Qi Zixiao. If we don't anger her, we won't be worried that she will attack us. Be careful of Zhao Prince Consort." "What do you mean? Those who use poison have dirty hearts." One of them was 28 years old and was called Du Mingyang. The other was 34 years old and was called Ling Du. Both of them were experts in Shadow Dream. Currently, there were 2 organizations among the sword masters. One was Shadow Dream, and the other was Hidden Dream. After Qing Lian passed the news to the 2 organizations, the people from Hidden Dream weren't too interested. On the contrary, many people from Shadow Dream felt that this was an opportunity. Many of them didn't have much ambition, but they hoped to be able to make use of secular resources, so that they wouldn't have to go to places where there were few people for a few decades. Chapter 893. Hey, have you heard? The #1 expert in the world has appeared and discovered the residence of an ancient deity. Inside the residence, there are treasures used by that deity. Ridiculous, haven't you read too many supernatural novels? Ancient deities? You don't know about this. Occasionally, ancient treasures are discovered, and every time, it causes a reign of terror. Let's not talk about other things. It's true that the legendary sword master killed his enemies with a flying sword. Sword masters have been rare in the past 100 years. As for the specifics, who saw it with their own eyes? Are you saying that the ancients made it up? That's ridiculous. Let's not talk about other things. How can those spirit will experts be fake? I think you are muddle-headed from reading books. In a restaurant in Great Xia, two scholars were in a heated argument. Around a table not far away, a man with a long beard and a white face sat upright. Around him were three capable men in their 20s and 30s. A few of them were listening to the quarrel between the two. The older man looked calm and unfathomable. A few of the capable men looked surprised. "Master, how do these ordinary people know about this?" one of them asked in surprise. The white-faced, long-bearded man was Liang Hongyu. He placed the wine cup in his hand on the table and said softly, "Don't tell me you think that I'm the only one who knows about this? It's obvious that someone deliberately leaked the news and wanted to muddy the waters." "Master, could this be a scam?" a disciple asked with concern. "I can't even tell if it's a letter from the #1 expert in the world. The handwriting can be faked, but the divine intent in the words can't be faked." Liang Hongyu frowned slightly. "I don't dare. However, this matter seems to be unusual. Li Fu, who hasn't shown his face for a long time, actually sent a letter personally. I'm sure that it wasn't just for me. There must be a lot of experts who went. I don't know what he valued so much in that secret residence, and who left it behind to make things so difficult for him. As for stirring up trouble, if they can stir up trouble in front of the #1 expert in the world, I will have to admire them." "Oh, it actually spread?" Ren Baqian was a little surprised when he heard the report. "Yes, it has spread within the borders of Great Xia. This subordinate heard it from someone in a restaurant. After that, I also wanted to find out where the news came from. I investigated for 7 days, but I failed." A young man stood below and said, "It's our subordinate's fault." Another middle-aged man said. The young man's name was Chen Feng, and he held the position of Baihu of the rearguard commandery. He was one of the people who delivered the letter to Great Xia. The middle-aged man was Gu Yu, the northern imperial commander of the rearguard commandery. His subordinates were the 1,000 soldiers who were being trained and prepared to be sent to Great Xia. Gu Yu's face was full of worry. If this news spreads, there will be many people who want to fish in troubled waters. I'm afraid it will affect what your highness wants to do. Rinpochian raised his eyebrows. Influence? What effect could it have? Another group of people going to watch the fireworks? He was curious as to who was behind this. To be able to spread the news on such a large scale, the other party must have used a lot of manpower. It was impossible for a major power to do so. However, the people he had chosen this time were not ordinary people. Anyone could do it. Even if it was a country or just a villa, with this kind of status, there were plenty of ways to spread the news. As for the purpose of the other party, needless to say, it was to muddy the waters and take advantage of the chaos to reap the greatest benefits. However, you guys didn't expect this, right? I invited you to watch the fireworks. As for the secret residence, Rinpochian wondered if he should build a secret residence. When the time came, he might be able to catch a lot of fish. Those who dared to come and fish in such a scene were not ordinary people. Rinpochian thought for a while before picking up the letter in front of him. After taking it out, there was a white handkerchief with a string of white pearls hanging in the corner. When he opened it, he saw a line of flamboyant writing. I heard that the Empress of Dayo has 7 drops of the blood of a real dragon, which contains the power of a real dragon. It is rare in today's world, and I want to take it to study and play with it. I came here on the 3rd day of the 6th month. The Empress of Dayo will definitely not let me return in vain. I'm handsome, Liu Xiang. Rinpochian carefully read it 3 times. After reading it for the first time, a strange look appeared on his face. Where did this come from? Rinpochian asked as he held the handkerchief in his hand. Your Highness, it was placed on the table in my room in the middle of the night when I was staying in Yiyang City. I'm incompetent and didn't even notice that someone had sneaked into my room. If the other party wanted my life, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to come back to see you. Chen Feng lowered his head and apologized. Who is this I'm handsome, Liu Xiang? Rinpochian asked with a faint smile. It should be Ghost Shadow Xian Shui. His martial arts aren't top-notch, but his lightness skills are indeed top-notch. In the past 10 years, he has committed many major crimes in Great Xia. It is said that he even stole an important treasure from the imperial palace. In order to capture him, the imperial court of Great Xia sent out Lung Ran, who has been tracking him for several years, but still hasn't been able to bring him to justice. This time, he actually set his sights on Her Majesty and Your Highness. We will definitely make sure that he doesn't return. However, Your Highness, you have to be careful. This person has committed many crimes since then, and each time, he was notified in advance. Although Lung Ran's combat power isn't top-notch, he's still a spirit will expert, and is proficient in tracking down and apprehending criminals. Even so, he couldn't do anything to him. It can be seen that this person is indeed outstanding, Guyu said. However, this person actually chose to do this at this time. We don't know if he's pretending to be the messenger. The 3rd day of June was the date set by Renbaqian in the letter. It would take 4 days to travel from Lan City to the predetermined location. It wasn't impossible for someone to pretend to be the messenger to restrain the experts of Dayo. After all, the location was in Dayo. If Dayo sent out many experts, it would indeed be a big threat. However, if it was true, and the other party stole something from the imperial treasury, it would be a huge loss of face. Renbaqian looked pensive, but he was thinking about another matter. The content and style of this letter were too similar. It was too much of a coincidence. Go and check if there's anyone called Gulong, Gulongxin, or Gulongju, Renbaqian said. Your Highness, is there a range? Guyu immediately asked. Check the market of Great Xia's novel authors, and see if there's anyone with this name. Or see if there's any novel with a similar plot. Renbaqian said. Yes. Well done. Renbaqian's praise surprised the two of them. They thought that they would be punished, but they didn't expect it to be a compliment. It's already beyond my expectations to be able to find so much information about Great Xia in such a short period of time. If you do a good job, you will naturally be rewarded in the future, Renbaqian said. It was impossible for the two of them to find out who might have committed the crime after receiving this letter. This could only mean that the other party had already been in the intelligence warehouse of the rearguard commandery from the beginning. Over the past few months, the others had been training, but Guyu had also sent people to pave the way and collect information on some experts. It seemed that the initial results had been seen. For example, Renbaqian had never heard of this ghost shadow before. Thank you, Your Highness. Your Highness still treats us so generously despite our incompetence. It's really frightening. The two of them bowed their heads and apologized. The credit that belongs to you is yours. I'm in charge of the rearguard commandery, and also in charge of the Black Bamboo Academy, and the Department of Commerce. I'm also very busy. Sooner or later, the rearguard commandery will be handed over to a capable person. Renbaqian chuckled. I will do my best to complete the task that Your Highness has given me. Guyu's expression changed slightly and immediately said, You may leave and do your best. Renbaqian nodded and let the two of them leave. Chapter 894. Du Mingyang and Ling Du were still in disbelief when they walked out of the rearguard commandery. They first went to the Black Bamboo Academy, then to the Honglu Bureau to request an audience with Renbaqian. Finally, they were taken to the rearguard commandery, in a courtyard in the corner of Beihong district. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was what Renbaqian said. Before coming, they knew from Qing Lian that Renbaqian wasn't interested in their fighting abilities. After all, the Aboriginals were a fighting race, and almost all the court officials were Cardinal Heaven experts, equivalent to spirit will experts, or even stronger than ordinary spirit will experts. Unlike the Yun Nation and Great Xia, where most spirit will experts lived outside the court, only a very small number of them would receive salaries from the court. After all, at this level of strength, they were enough to dominate a region. As long as they didn't do anything that angered the heavens, no one would easily provoke them. Why should they care about others? However, in Dayo, the most powerful force was the court, where almost all the Cardinal Heaven experts served. No one knew how many Cardinal Heaven experts there were in the 60,000 mountains. Even the Empress herself didn't know. Under such circumstances, Why would they care about the fighting power that they could only drive with their lifespan? This was also the reason why they were tempted. No sword master liked to fight because the price was their lifespan. In fact, the reason why they wanted to leave the secluded areas was that they often encountered danger there. And every time they used their spirit swords, their lifespan would also be consumed. Therefore, even though they were spirit will experts, most of them didn't regard themselves as spirit will experts or ordinary people. They were a group of people who drifted away from society. There was no need to fight, no need to roam the wilderness all year round, no need to do messy things, and yet they could obtain the materials they needed. This was something that many sword masters dreamed of. However, Renbachian wanted to go, which was especially incredible for the two of them. Study. Renbachian wanted them to study, and then watch their progress. He wasn't forcing them to study. They could also read through it, or be good at a particular subject. As for what would happen next, according to Renbachian, if they were qualified, they could choose to become teachers or researchers. This was something that they didn't expect. They were sent to a courtyard next to the Honglu Bureau. After closing the door, Du Mingyang said, "I still feel a little strange." "I also feel strange," Lingdu said. "Zhao Prince Consort spent so much money to find us just for this? The Aboriginals originally lacked such people, but now that Dayo had conquered the Yun nation, what kind of people couldn't they find? Why are you looking for us?" Du Mingyang's face was full of disbelief. Lingdo deeply agreed. Although Qinglian said that he is trustworthy, Qinglian's current status might not be reassuring. We're different from them. We spend our days in the wilderness and rarely interact with people. We're not good at scheming, so we're afraid that there might be traps behind us. Since we're already here, let's stay here for a while. It won't take long. Then let's see what he has up his sleeves, said Lingdo after thinking about it. In any case, I'm still confident in my memory. If I hadn't become a sword slave back then, I would have been the top scholar. Du Mingyang said resentfully. When I took the imperial examination at the age of 16, I had to give up everything because I became a sword slave. Sometimes, I feel that being a sword slave is a curse. In reality, it wasn't just the two of them. All the sword masters were literate and well-read. After all, without extensive knowledge, how would one know where the materials might appear? As for being literate, it was the same reason. Nowadays, both the practitioners and the sword masters were all literate. If the former were illiterate and couldn't even understand martial arts, how could they practice martial arts? The first prerequisite for practicing martial arts was to be literate. In this era, they were definitely a rare group of people with a high level of education. Of course, some practitioners who hadn't even reached the manual level and some gifted people were excluded. The Aboriginals were an exception. This was a gifted race. Your Majesty, there's something fun today. Renbachian hugged the Empress's waist and laughed. He thought of the letter he saw in the afternoon and found it interesting. The Empress sniffled and suddenly said, "There's the smell of a woman." She glared at him and said, "I'm listening to your explanation." "How is that possible?" Renbachian chuckled. He was always at the academy and the rearguard commandery. Where could he have met a woman? The Empress's face immediately turned cloudy. Renbachian immediately felt that something was wrong. He quickly let go of her and gestured for her to stop. Then he jumped to the ground and began to spin in circles, thinking hard. Speaking of which, the Empress's temper had been changing these 2 days. Could it be that the secretion of estrogen after pregnancy affected even the Empress? This thought flashed through Renbachian's mind, but he immediately cut it off and began to think hard about what kind of smell he had gotten. Logically speaking, a light touch shouldn't leave a smell, and it was impossible for the Empress to smell it. Could it be that the Empress was deceiving him? Was she becoming paranoid because of the effects of estrogen? That couldn't be, right? However, this was hard to say. I've never been pregnant before, so how would I know? It seemed like I should have a gynecologist at home in the future, so that I could ask her about it. Renbachian spread out his hands and said with a relaxed smile, "I've been at the academy and the rearguard commandery all day. The guards can testify that they wouldn't dare to deceive your Majesty." "Do you mean that you dare to?" The Empress's face began to turn gloomy. I can't bear to. Renbachian said gently. Then tell me where the smell on your body came from. The Empress's eyes began to emit a cold light, and the surrounding temperature dropped. Renbachian was speechless. How could he continue to live like this? He was more King wrong than Dou-yi. I really didn't. Renbachian was at a loss for words, and his forehead was full of sweat. He obviously didn't smell anything, but the Empress insisted that he did. This matter couldn't be explained at all. He didn't expect the Empress to suddenly burst into laughter, and flowers suddenly bloomed in the hall. I'm just teasing you. I've been watching this scene in the past 2 days, and I want to see your reaction. The Empress's face was full of smiles, and her nose was slightly wrinkled, making her look playful and cute. However, Renbachian wasn't in a good mood at all. He was scared by the Empress and broke out in a sweat. Your Majesty, don't watch too much television. That thing is a source of trouble. The Empress chuckled and didn't say anything. When Renbachian came over, her eyes suddenly flashed coldly, and she slapped him away. You still dare to say that you didn't lie to me? Renbachian rolled on the ground a dozen times, and his mind was in a daze. Then he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Damn it, I've been deceived. Renbachian jumped up from the ground, tore off his coat, and carefully looked at the back of it. He carefully sniffed it again, and finally found some traces after a while. He carefully kept a distance of 10 meters from the Empress, even though it was only a short distance. He threw the coat to the Empress. Your Majesty, can you see if it's 5 inches below the collar? Renbachian's face began to turn black. The Empress sniffed it, and a cold glint appeared in her eyes. She then suppressed it and asked, Tell me what happened. Renbachian took a look. When I left the academy today, Tonglan and Shirgan patted me on the back. It's not the smell of Tonglan. The Empress's eyes flashed coldly. At this point, Renbachian had already figured it out. Tonglan was punished by me to clean the toilets because she beat up a junior student. I don't know where she got the rouge from, but she patted it on my back. This time, he was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. These 2 bastards, just wait for the 2 of you to clean the toilets until you graduate. He then looked at the Empress. There was indeed something wrong with the Empress. What's with that look? The Empress's face cleared up a little, and then she stared at him again. Love. Your Majesty's look. I'm your husband. If I don't love you, who should I love? Renbachian's back was drenched in cold sweat again. If he were to say that she was a lunatic, this day next year would be his death anniversary. Chapter 895. When Renbachian arrived on Earth, he asked someone to bring the 8 thick-browed, big-eyed winged cavalry warriors down to make arrangements. He also asked his assistant to arrange for a gynecologist. After waiting for 2 hours, he finally saw a bespectacled female doctor in her 30s. She wasn't old, but her skills weren't low. Hello, have you eaten? Renbachian was sitting at the table and gorging himself. When he saw the person brought in by the secretary, he looked up with an inquiring expression. The doctor was stunned. She didn't expect to come in to ask if she had eaten instead of seeing the patient. This was quite rare. I'm not hungry, thank you. Where's the patient? The doctor was a little reserved. After all, she had been briefed on some matters before coming. Those brought in by the assistant were all very reliable. She's not here. Take a seat first and wait for me. I'm starving. Renbachian smiled and continued to bury his head in his food. It had to be said that the family of chefs that he had brought in was really profitable. Renbachian felt that he had regained his weight rapidly after coming back twice. His weight was close to 150 kilograms again. Of course, this was also related to his recent cultivation and activation of the Sage mode. He would lose dozens of kilograms every time he moved, and no one could bear it. The assistant brought the doctor to the living room, leaving Renbachian to continue eating 3 bowls of noodles and a whole roasted lamb before leaving with his belly in his hands. Half full. Hello, doctor. I'd like to ask why my wife is pregnant and has been in a bad mood recently. Renbachian's attitude was quite humble, which made the doctor feel good. After all, she was brought here from the hospital. Even if she knew that the other party's identity wasn't ordinary, she would still feel a little uncomfortable. If you want to understand the patient's condition, it's best to see the patient with your own eyes. How long is she pregnant? She's been pregnant for a little over 5 months. Other than her bad temper, are there any other changes? For example, her personality, diet, or daily behavior? Renbachian thought for a while. She's moody and says things that she wouldn't have said before. In addition, she's become a little suspicious. Do you rarely accompany her? The doctor pushed up her glasses and asked, looking at the fierce-looking baldy in front of her who exuded a vicious aura from head to toe. She had some guesses in her heart. I've been a little busy recently, but I accompany her every night. The doctor asked some more questions and then said, after all, I haven't seen the patient, so I can only give a brief explanation. Generally speaking, there were several reasons why a pregnant woman would experience such a change. Physiologically, many pregnant women would have varying degrees of hormonal changes after pregnancy. For example, progesterone and estrogen would both increase, causing pregnant women to become sensitive, emotional, and prone to throwing tantrums. Psychologically, pregnant women also needed companionship. In the early stages of pregnancy, the physical discomfort brought to the pregnant women made some pregnant women psychologically unable to adapt to the change from being a wife to a mother. During this period, pregnant women were often emotionally unstable, easily angered, and more dependent. Although your wife has been pregnant for more than 5 months, it is not uncommon for some people to have this kind of change last until now. Also, the pregnant woman's range of activities is very limited, which will also make her anxious. Renbachian nodded thoughtfully. Don't underestimate this kind of change. It's not good for the pregnant woman and the fetus over time. Then what should we do? Spend more time with her and care for her. Also, eat less spicy food and listen to more music. Renbachian's spirits were immediately lifted. Then he suddenly thought of something. Does her drinking affect her? He initially thought that with the Empress's ability to control her body, drinking alcohol shouldn't be a problem. However, it seemed like it was hard to say. The doctor's eyes widened and looked incredulous. Of course not. Even ordinary people know not to drink alcohol when preparing for pregnancy, let alone after pregnancy. Alcohol can cause fetal alcohol poisoning, destroy the undeveloped brain cells of the fetus, and cause miscarriage. Renbachian immediately pulled a long face when he heard this, even though he already knew that drinking would affect pregnant women. How much does she drink a day? No matter how much she drinks, she has to stop drinking. Renbachian thought about it. About 2 bottles of erguotu a day seemed a little too much. He had to go back and stop the Empress from drinking at least 1 bottle. By the way, there hasn't been any change in her belly after 5 months of pregnancy. Are there any problems? Every pregnant woman's situation is different. You can only know after a B-scan at the hospital. After that, Renbachian asked a few more questions before asking the assistant to send the doctor away. When the assistant returned, Renbachian asked a question. Is there an error shop in this city? Renbachian felt that it was time to show off his error skills. The Empress groggily touched her side and touched nothing. That fellow was still on Earth and hadn't returned. She opened her eyes and saw that there was a ceiling made of red gauze above the wooden bed. Otherwise, the ceiling would be too high in the hall, and she would feel uncomfortable looking at it. Although Renbachian didn't notice much, the Empress was very familiar with the condition of her body. Naturally, she knew what kind of changes her body had undergone recently. There was a life growing in her belly and absorbing her strength as nutrients. Although the amount was insignificant to her, it was gradually increasing. This was a good thing. At least for a period of time, she wouldn't have to worry about reaching the limit of her strength. At least for the time being, she didn't want to break through. A child was still a very unfamiliar concept to her. It was as if she suddenly had such a small thing in her belly, making her feel at a loss for a period of time. The Empress rolled twice on the bed. With one less person beside her, the bed seemed a lot more spacious. She hugged the other pillow and continued to roll on the bed with a smile on her face. She felt that she was in a good mood today. Through the window of the palace, She could see the sky brightening up. The weather was good, and she should take a stroll in the garden after court. After washing up and preparing to have breakfast, she suddenly felt something strange behind her. She turned around and saw Renbachien in baggy shorts and a t-shirt carrying bags of various sizes. "What did you bring for me?" The Empress was looking forward to it. Clang, clang, clang. Renbachien pulled out a set of underwear, made of a few ropes from the bag. It could be said that he didn't block anything that should be blocked, and he didn't block anything that shouldn't be blocked either. "You dog!" The Empress suddenly spat. "You want me to wear this? Actually, I can try." The Empress rested her head on the table and said, "In that case, dance for me first." "It's a little early. Your Majesty, are you going to the morning court session?" Renbachien laughed. "That's true. I'll let you go first," the Empress said lazily as she looked at the clock at the side. After the Empress left, Renbachien began to assemble some of the things he brought back. One of them was a family doctor robot. It had a humanoid upper body similar to porcelain, and a caterpillar lower body. Chapter 896. I'm Xiaoji, the family doctor. I've detected volatile ethanol in the air. For the health of you and the fetus, please stop drinking. Just as the Empress picked up her second cup, the strange-looking robot not far away seemed to have been switched on. Its eyes flashed red, and the tracks under its body moved slowly toward the Empress. At the same time, a synthesized sound was emitted from the robot's body. The sudden sound stunned the Empress, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan. Robots were no strangers to the academy. They were completely made of machinery, yet they could walk and talk. They had always been very popular among the students. The evidence was that they would occasionally catch students sneaking into the academy in the middle of the night to cut them into pieces. However, it was still quite fresh to Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan. They found this strange thing interesting in the morning and studied it for a long time. However, they didn't expect it to make a sound while the Empress was drinking. "Your Majesty, that thing is making a sound," Hong Yuan said excitedly. Pow! Crash! The Empress slapped the robot, which had just reached her side, into a pile of parts. The composite ceramic shell that could resist guns was smashed all over the ground as if it had been smashed by a sledgehammer. "There's no sound now." The Empress calmly poured the wine into her mouth. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan couldn't hide the regret on their faces. Such a fun thing was gone in an instant. That day, Renbachien deliberately finished his other work early, and wanted to go back to accompany the Empress. He first returned to Yaohua Palace, but he didn't see the robot family doctor. He immediately had a bad feeling. He asked the guard outside. "I threw out a pile of trash in the morning. It's broken beyond recognition. Are you referring to that, Your Highness?" Although Renbachien didn't see it, he felt that it was it. Well, it seemed like there was still a long way to go for the Empress to quit drinking. "Where's Your Majesty?" "She should be in Jinghua Garden." When Renbachien came outside, he heard the sound of a zither. He stood in place and thought for a while before going back to get his eru. "Your Majesty." Hundreds of flowers bloomed in the garden. The contrast of red and white was extremely beautiful. The flowers in the garden were taken care of by the gardener that Renbachien had brought back from Tianjing Basin. It was indeed much better than the messy weeds that grew in the past. Not far in front of him were two ladies playing the zither. The Empress, who was holding a wine glass, turned her head and saw Renbachien, and the thing in his hand. Immediately, she became vigilant and asked, "What are you trying to do?" Renbachien didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the Empress's reaction. "My era skills are pretty good. Killing is as easy as waving your hand." If you were born a few decades earlier and learned the right martial arts, you would be considered a top-notch figure by now. The Empress rarely praised him. "It's really not bad. I'll pull one to liven things up, Your Majesty." He felt that the Empress was biased against him. "Do you believe that I will bury you along with the thing in your hand?" The Empress glared at him. Renbachien spread his hands. Prejudice was really scary. He helplessly put the eru aside, walked to the Empress's side and sat down. The family doctor robot in the palace hall. "What are you trying to say?" "Forget it, it's nothing." Renbachian felt that given the Empress's current mood, it was better not to test the waters. Are you going out of the palace in the afternoon? The Empress asked while listening to the zither and drinking wine. When Renbachian heard her voice, he felt warmth in his heart. Usually, if the Empress didn't express it, he wouldn't have realized that she actually hoped that he would accompany her whenever he was free. No, I will accompany Her Majesty in the afternoon. I haven't accompanied Her Majesty in a long time, and I always feel that the time I spend with her every night isn't enough. Renbachian subconsciously glanced at the wine glass. He had no choice. After what the doctor had said, he had no choice but to pay attention to it. Sure enough, after hearing what he said, the Empress couldn't help but smile. Then when she saw his gaze, her face stiffened. What are you looking at? Actually, I think there's something that's pretty good. Do you want to try it, Your Majesty? Renbachian rolled his eyes. Fortunately, he had prepared many backup plans. Sure enough, the Empress became curious after hearing this and asked, What? Qingyuan, go get the white and green boxes. Renbachian replied. Oh. Qingyuan immediately skipped away. What exactly is it? The Empress asked. You will know in a while, Your Majesty. Renbachian was delighted. Not long after, Qingyuan came back with a box of calcium milk. Renbachian took one for the Empress, inserted the tube, and passed it to her. He took another two and gave them to Qingyuan and Hongyuan. Then he took one for himself and started drinking. It's pretty good. The Empress liked it as soon as she took a sip. Under the sun in the palace of Dayo, the Empress, a prince, and two maids were drinking Waha calcium milk. Renbachian felt that he had to ask them for advertising fees. After drinking 3 bottles in a row, the Empress took the wine glass from Hongyuan and drank another glass. Renbachian tried his best to pretend that he didn't see it, and reached out to touch the Empress's belly. Slap. The Empress slapped him back, squinted her eyes and asked, What are you doing? I'm concerned about my son. Renbachian covered his hand and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Practicing the Yang quintessence had indeed greatly increased his defense, but the Empress also used more strength when hitting him. It seemed that practicing this martial art would make things easier for the Empress. Who told you that it's a son? The Empress touched her belly and snorted. A daughter is fine. Renbachian didn't mind and smiled. The Empress was speechless. After a while, she said doubtfully. That day, Tu-Wan asked me that I should be able to tell if it's a son or a daughter by now, but it's neither a son nor a daughter. Renbachian was stunned and asked, Then what is it? It's a ball. Ah. Renbachian was stunned. What did you say, Your Majesty? That's strange. It seems to be different from others. The Empress was puzzled at first, then relieved. However, I'm the Empress, so it's normal for me to be different from others. It shouldn't be. Renbachian widened his eyes and said, Being the Empress is a matter of status, but the one in my belly isn't. It's a matter of race. What was going on with a ball in her belly? Your Majesty, are you really going to give birth to a Neza? Don't be so nervous. The Empress waved her hand and said, You're already a prince, so you should act like one. Don't be so flustered. No, Your Majesty, this isn't a matter of whether I'm a prince or not. Even a god would panic if he knew that there was a ball in his belly. It's nothing. Maybe the power in my body is too great for him to absorb, so he formed a ball and wrapped himself up to avoid being hit by too much power. I am a talent that has never been seen in 1,000 years, so my son should also be a talent that has never been seen in 1,000 years. The Empress thought about it. She had been thinking about this matter recently, and felt that it was quite possible. However, we can't know if it's a boy or a girl like this. After listening to the Empress, Renbachian finally felt relieved. It would be better if it was like this. If a ball fell and called him father, he wouldn't even know where his face was. Your Majesty, do you want to see a doctor? Renbachian was still a little worried. He's very healthy. I can feel it. The Empress waved her hand. It's just that I'm a little unhappy that I can't see him. At first, Renbachian wanted to ask the Empress about her belly being the same for more than 5 months, but he wasn't in the mood to do so now. Chapter 897. Zhu Hua, stand there. Ren Baqian brandished the Type 81 rifle and yelled at her in a nonchalant manner. A girl was scurrying around the campus like a monkey. Bystanders could only see a faint shadow and couldn't find her. If I stand, you will turn me into a beehive. Zhu Hua obviously wasn't going to be a fool. Seeing that Ren Baqian was angry, she decided to hide first. Without looking, Ren Baqian followed the sound and fired a series of bullets. Li Fu, who was resting with his eyes closed, didn't even look up. He tapped his fingers in the air a few times, and a few bullets fell to the ground. You're targeting me, aren't you? If it were someone else, you would have shot them in the face. Li Fu said faintly. Pfft, such a bad temper. Are you constipated? Not far away, a few students turned their heads to look out of a window. Principal is really scary. This classroom was filled with this year's freshmen, and they obviously weren't used to Ren Baqian's excellent education habits. A young girl stuck out her tongue and said, "It's all right." Of course you think it's all right. Principal is always kind when he sees you. If you put more effort into your exams, he definitely won't be fierce to you. Zhang Kaixian squinted and smiled. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Another series of gunshots rang out. Shirgan, who was walking out of the Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute, looked in the direction of the school, smiled and said, Yagüe has been very anxious recently. The gunshots that hadn't been heard for a while had been heard frequently in the past 2 days. However, this sound is really nostalgic. These are the scars of a man. Du Laolu, who had somehow slipped out, took off his shirt, and some faint marks could be seen on his body, which were particularly conspicuous under the sun. He had been hung up the most in the past few years. Tong Lan, who was sitting on the wall, sneered. It's obviously because you are stupid, okay? Du Laolu couldn't be bothered with Tong Lan, or rather, he was too lazy to look for a beating. He turned to Shirgan and asked, Do you think this internal combustion engine can replace manpower like Yagüe said? Why not? The steam car has already explained everything, but it's still too big. If the internal combustion engine is shrunk, we can see what we want. The biodiesel was much more efficient than black coal and charcoal. I'm looking forward to seeing the streets filled with the things we've created, and seeing their surprised expressions. Once the internal combustion engine is manufactured, we can graduate, Du Laolu said after thinking for a while. Yes. Shirgan heaved a sigh of relief, his gaze calm. That's hard to say. I heard that when the time comes, there will be 2 choices. One is to continue to study, there will be more knowledge to learn, and the other is to be released to fill in the various departments. Some people will probably stay. Of course, those who aren't smart should hurry up and graduate. Tong Lan threw this sentence on the wall and disappeared without a trace. Shirgan smiled at Du Laolu. She doesn't have any ill intentions. I know, it's just that her mouth is a little smelly. Du Laolu waved his hand. Having known her for more than 3 years, he naturally knew what she was like. Besides, she was still young. Even if he didn't take into account her young age, he still had to take into account the size of her fist. Where are we going to find the world's #1 expert? In Lan City, 2 young women dressed as Taoist nuns were walking on the street with their horses. The younger of the 2 turned her head and asked, This is Qi Zixiao's place, so we have to pay our respects to the owner first. We can ask her about Li Fu. Li Yuanzhu looked at the pedestrians and the shops on the side. In fact, there was a simpler way. She just had to release her aura, and it would be immediately detected. However, given Li Yuanzhu's character, she naturally wouldn't do such a high-profile thing. The 2 of them entered the city and went straight to the palace. The 2 of you in front, stop. The palace is a forbidden area, and you are not allowed to approach. The 2 of them were stopped before they reached the palace gates. Hey, tell your Empress that my senior sister is here. Ningqing bared her fangs and brandished her claws like a fox. Li Yuanzhu was that tiger. Li Yuanzhu glared at her, stepped forward, cupped her fists and said, Li Yuanzhu from Great Xia requests to see Dayo's Empress. Do you think you can see Her Majesty whenever you want? Go to the Honglu Bureau and report your identities. If Her Majesty wants to see you, she will naturally summon you. That guard obviously didn't remember Li Yuanju's name. Although Li Yuanju was the third most powerful expert in the world, she was still too far away from them. Hey, my senior sister is... Oh. Ning Qing's eyes widened, but she was covered by Li Yuanju before she could finish her sentence. The latter smiled at the guards and pulled her away. Senior sister, they actually asked you to report to the Honglu Bureau? Qi Zixiao is too arrogant. They don't even know who we are. Their attitude is already beyond my expectations. Li Yuanju chuckled. According to the description of the Great Xia people, the aboriginals were extremely ferocious and overbearing. Although these two guards were a little vulgar, they had a good attitude, which surprised her a little. Then, are we just going to go to the Honglu Bureau obediently? Ning Qing was somewhat unwilling. Go and find that person, Li Yuanju said after some thought. That person? That scoundrel from before? Ning Qing's face turned red when she recalled their encounter a few years ago. That scoundrel actually said that she and senior sister had small breasts. It's been a few years, and you still haven't forgotten? Li Yuanju had long been indifferent to that matter. Anyway, it's passed down from your ancestors. Don't mind it too much. Li Yuanju chuckled. Passed down from my ancestors? What do you mean passed down from my ancestors? Ning Qing was stunned. She then reacted and was immediately embarrassed. Senior sister. She then gave up on herself and said, I have a flat chest that's passed down from my ancestors. So what? She turned to look at Li Yuanju and said, Senior sister, you aren't any better than me. Li Yuanju smiled and didn't say anything. In fact, she didn't care about this kind of thing at all. She just happened to use it to bully Ning Qing. It was easy to find out where Renbaqian was. The two of them had just arrived at the academy when they saw a black shadow flitting across the wall and disappearing. Li Yuanju saw it clearly. It was a girl who was about 16 or 17 years old, wearing clothes made of animal skin, and she stuck out her tongue as she ran. The two of them then asked to see Renbaqian, and things went much smoother this time. Renbaqian had an idea after listening to the description of the attire. It was about time for Li Yuanju to arrive. Renbaqian calmed himself down and went to welcome her. After all, she was the third most powerful expert in the world, and he had to show her the proper attitude. He saw two pretty girls in Taoist robes standing there. They had met once 3.5 years ago, and it seemed that time hadn't left any traces on them. She was still as flat as ever. It's about time for the two of you to arrive. Renbaqian had no intention of hiding anything. He looked at Li Yuanju and exclaimed, You're still the same as 3 years ago. You're still so untainted by the secular world, which is admirable. The other two almost didn't recognize him. Ning Qing opened her small mouth and couldn't help but ask, How did you become like this? Although he was a little wretched back then, he was still quite delicate. Look at him now. Renbaqian touched his head and laughed. I've become bald and stronger. The two of them obviously didn't understand this joke. Li Yuanju smiled and didn't say anything. Ning Qing only noticed Renbaqian's aura at this moment, and was slightly surprised. She couldn't tell that this person was at least at the earth will level. She then looked at herself and pouted, feeling a little upset. We just met. Li Yuanju thought about it. She should call him Your Highness, but she wasn't from Dayo. Calling him young master didn't seem like it. Call me fellow Taoist. Renbaqian laughed. Identity didn't mean anything to the other party, so it was better to call her fellow Taoist. Hey, are you also a Taoist? Ning Qing was surprised. Chapter 898. Buddhism. Li Yuanju thought for a moment, but she had never heard of such a sect. On the other hand, Ning Qing's face fell. It was over. This guy actually believed in an evil cult. This kind of people was the most annoying. Each and every one of them was like a lunatic. Renbaqian led the way for the two of them and casually said, Your Taoist sect teaches that from nothingness, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, and 3 begets all things. Buddhism talks about emptiness. Emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. Taoism emphasized dual cultivation of life and death. cultivating one's heart and tempering one's nature. Buddhism focused on cultivating one's nature, and not on cultivating one's fate. Focusing on understanding one's nature. What the Taoist sects sought was a seamless pagoda that was self-contained and without any gaps. The Buddhist sect cultivated the leakless fruit, which allowed one to pass through all leaks. In reality, the two of them cultivated different techniques, but in the end they reached the same goal through different means. Although Rinpoche only remembered that he was a Buddhist when he used it, he still had a deep understanding of Buddhism. That Heart Sutra had helped him not to collapse due to the endless deaths over the past few years. Although he had only read this one book, it would naturally surface in his mind whenever he was on the brink of death. His understanding of Buddhism was not shallow. If the little monk had heard his words, he would have shouted Arhut again. Li Yuanju's eyes lit up when she heard that. From what he said, Buddhism was the complete opposite of Tao. One was alive, the other was empty. One cultivates one's heart and tempers one's nature, while the other can see one's nature clearly. One from nothing to something, the other from something to nothing. This immediately piqued her interest. However, whether this Buddhist sect was an orthodox sect or not, she couldn't tell just from this point alone. Those evil sects usually spoke in a very pleasant manner. What is the purpose of Buddhism? Transcend the self. How do I transcend? Find yourself. What should we do? You are Buddha, I am Buddha, she is Buddha, and all living beings are Buddha. If you can find that bit of Buddha nature in yourself, you will naturally be Buddha. That's why the Buddhist sect says that the heart must see one's nature, and that is to see Buddha nature. Then what is Buddha? Buddha is the forerunner. Ningqing, who was listening at the side, was confused as they exchanged questions and answers. Buddha is the forerunner, so why are all living beings Buddha? Since all living beings are Buddhas, why do they need to cultivate Buddhas? It was obviously a load of nonsense. The more Li Yuanju asked, the more energetic she became. Her aura was different, and her eyes were filled with understanding and doubt. Thank you for clearing up my doubts, fellow Taoist. She cupped her fists at him and asked, May I know where Buddhism originated from? Are there any classics in the sect that I can read? After chatting with him for a while, she had a good impression of him. At the very least, he didn't look as frivolous as he was last time. Although he wasn't very ambitious, he was still quite something. Especially from the first few sentences, it could be seen that the other party also had a good understanding of Taoism. One had to know that the influence of Taoism in Great Xia was not that great. Furthermore, there were many branches of Taoism within Great Xia. Naturally, its influence was limited. There are millions of Buddhist believers, and there are even some in Tianjin Basin. As for the scriptures in our sects, we do have them. However, if you feel that the Taoist deities are the best in the world and the Buddhist scriptures state that Buddha is supreme, don't get angry because of the conflict between the sects, Rinpoche said rather casually. Ningqing moved her lips. Nonsense. There were only hundreds of millions of people in Great Xia. Could it be that everyone in Great Xia believed in Buddha? Li Yuanju's eyes flickered. She also thought of this problem, but she didn't say much. Rest assured, fellow Taoist. In that case, I'll get someone to make a copy and send it to you in a few days. Rinpoche inexplicably thought of a saying. Fellow Taoist, please stay. I think you are fated with Buddha. If this Taoist nun became a nun, she would be quite pretty. A rather strange smile appeared on his face. Li Yuanju suddenly felt that this person beside her seemed to be up to no good, and subconsciously distanced herself from him. She changed the topic and said, The two of us came here to pay our respects to the owner of this place, but we ended up getting shut at the door. I think the guards don't know the two of you. Why don't you wait here for a while? I'll get someone to inform them later. Thank you for your trouble. There's another thing I want to ask Zhao Prince Consort. May I know where Li Fu is? Li Yuanju asked again. Li Fu. Oh. Rinpoche looked around the courtyard, pointed in a certain direction, and asked, Over there. Rinpoche saw an old man with messy white hair and beard squatting on the ground and digging a hole. He seemed to be making a fire. There were also a few things called sweet potatoes that he had seen recently. Liar. Ningqing immediately shouted. Li Fu, The world's most powerful expert? Li Yuanzhu asked faintly. She wanted to tell him that she was looking for Li Fu, the world's most powerful expert. However, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. His aura was restrained, and he looked no different from an ordinary person. It wasn't normal for such a person to appear here. Furthermore, well, it didn't matter. Furthermore, Li Yuanzhu just felt that he was no different from an ordinary person. Is there such a big difference? You can't even recognize him in person? Li Yuanzhu couldn't take it anymore. She turned to look at Ren Baqian, and saw that he was watching the show. She had no choice but to look at Li Fu again. She frowned for a moment, before gradually relaxing her brows. She walked to a few meters away from Li Fu, cupped her hands and said, Li Yuanzhu from Zhenwen Temple greets Senior. Li Fu used his finger to drill into the wood a few times. The moment his finger left the wood, a flame sprang out of the hole in the wood. He then looked up and said, You're too polite, little girl. The person looking for you is that fellow, and it has nothing to do with me. Li Yuanzhu suddenly realized that she had been deceived. That letter was actually written by Qi Zixiao. However, she didn't get angry and simply asked, Why are you here, Senior? I'm old and just trying to make a living. That fellow has a lot of interesting things in his hands, and I'm waiting to see them. Li Fu lowered his head and continued to make a fire to roast the sweet potatoes. If anyone else saw the world's most powerful expert, they would definitely be unwilling to leave. However, Li Yuanzhu stood in place and thought for a while before turning to walk toward him. In fact, she was still a little curious as to why Li Fu was here, but since he didn't want to say, she wouldn't force him. Was the letter written by Qi Zixiao? Li Yuanzhu looked up at him with a pair of clear eyes that seemed to be able to see straight into his heart. Didn't you swear that it was definitely written by the world's most powerful expert? Ningqing whispered. Li Yuanzhu glared at her. Whose side were you on? However, she really didn't expect Qi Zixiao to actually do such a thing. It doesn't matter who wrote it, but the matter isn't fake. What do you know about the origin of the human race and the foreign races? Ren Baqian asked. Nothing. Li Yuanzhu shook her head. Ren Baqian felt relieved. He was really afraid that it would be like the last time he spoke to Li Fu, where he would be rebuked as soon as he opened his mouth. Finally, there was someone who didn't know. Although Li Yuanzhu was the third most powerful expert in the world, she was still young and usually stayed in the Taoist temple all year round. As such, she really didn't know much about these things. Come in and take a seat. Ren Baqian returned to the office and waited for the two of them to sit down before saying, The reason why I wrote you this time is related to this matter. Liar. Ningqing muttered again. Ren Baqian didn't care and continued. The human race came from the south of the 60,000 mountains, where there are many ancient races. Back then, the human race was defeated, and less than 100,000 people survived and migrated here. Some of them specialized in physique cultivation, and stayed in the 60,000 mountains to guard against enemies. This is the origin of the Aboriginals. Liar. Ningqing shouted with her eyes wide open. This story is too outrageous. Li Yuanzhu was also shocked. What's the use of lying to you? Ren Baqian spread his hands and continued. Li Fu knew about this. For him, there was no difference between Great Xia and Dayo. However, he knew about it before I did. Then why did he tell you? Li Yuanzhu was puzzled. Why didn't Li Fu tell others about this but told Ren Baqian? There were many experts in Great Xia, but she had never heard of this matter. Him? He wished he could bury this matter in his stomach for the rest of his life. Do you know why the experts from 100 years ago disappeared? Ren Baqian chuckled. They are all dead. Su Wuming killed them. That's because those people wanted to find an opportunity to break through and wanted to go out and take a look. This is the barbaric land, which is different from the outside world. It lacks some things, so it's almost impossible to reach a higher level of strength. Just look at how many experts have opened up the heaven and earth region since ancient times. However, opening up the heaven and earth region isn't unusual in the outside world. Chapter 899. First of all, I'll say that I don't believe in Buddhism. If I say that I believe in shamanism, do you believe me? They're not shamans or anything like that. They're Chuma immortals. We have quite a few of them here. He had seen all kinds of strange things, so he was more or less skeptical, but he would rather believe it. I've only been to a monastery once in my life. It was when I was writing Abbot. I wanted to see what the inside of a monastery was like. Then burn a hole in his clothes while burning incense. That's quite a tragedy. Why do I know something about Buddhism? It was in the previous book. I wanted to write about a graceful flowery monk like Gulong's Wuxia, but in the end, I had to look up information on Buddhism when I was writing, right? After looking around and communicating with some of his book friends, he gained a better understanding of Buddhism. He realized that many things were not as he had imagined. In the end, the main character turned from a fake monk to a real one. Actually, I used to hate Buddhism. When I looked at Buddhism, I also hated Buddhism. However, people like Monk Wuhua couldn't be hated. This was the charm of the characters written by Gulong. To be honest, most readers don't know much about Buddhism and Taoism. It's everyone's freedom to hate Buddhism, hate this religion, and hate that religion. Hating Buddhism is a personal feeling, and no one can interfere. But if you want to scold me because of this matter, you should have a valid reason. There were a lot of dark Buddhism in online novels, and many people felt that it was true. As for why I said so much when I don't believe in Buddhism, who would be happy to be scolded for no reason? If you were scolded for no reason, you would also get angry. It was fine if the scolding was reasonable, but the scolding was baffling. Just because of this, I was threatened and cursed by a group of people. How could I not retaliate? This time, it was what the ancients said, an eye for an eye. Firstly, many people say that Buddhism cultivates the afterlife, while Taoism cultivates the present. In reality, Buddhism focused more on cultivating one's present life, while Taoism had its own ways to cultivate the afterlife. Why was there such a big misunderstanding? The main reason was that the Pure Land sect, which was the most widely spread, was aimed at ordinary people, the toiling masses. In the past, they could not even read a word. How could they be taught about the afterlife and cultivation methods? Why do people say that Taoism has a high threshold? Isn't it here? Secondly, some people say that Buddha will bless you. Go look for whoever said so. Buddha was not a god, but a human, a forerunner. After passing on what he comprehended to you, the next step would be karma, and karma. Saving you is the same as Buddha saving the fated one. Not to bless you. From a Buddhist point of view, everything in the world was fabricated. Why would they bless you? Since it was all fabricated, what was the point of blessing? *T, he was completely deified. As for slandering Buddha, the Zen sect still had people who slandered Buddha. Third, the boundless treasury. This should be the earliest charity event in the country, right? During the harvest period, the commoners would offer some offerings. During the years of disaster, the monasteries would lend those offerings to the commoners at low or even zero interest. To be honest, it was a survival policy. However, it was not uncommon for a good scripture to be misread in the wrong direction in history, right? In the end, it became a black dot. Fourth, don't get married. The Quanzhen sect doesn't allow marriages either. It's just to cut off some distracting thoughts. Why didn't they scold him for Real? Fifthly, when Buddhism is flourishing, Taoism is ascending the mountain. In troubled times, Buddhism is ascending the mountain and Taoism is descending the mountain. He did not know where this nonsense came from on Baidu. To be honest, Buddhism had contributed a lot to the country and the people, such as the Ming dynasty's resistance against the Japanese pirates and the Sino-Japanese War. If that was the case, the number of Taoists who came down from the mountains to rebel during the chaotic times was not small. 6. Taoism is not Taoism. Don't get it mixed up. If you really want to talk about the national religion, it should be Confucianism. However, Confucianism disappeared at the beginning of the 20th century, probably around the time of the May 4th movement. 7th, the one who was deceived by a monk. If you were deceived by a civil servant, would you still hate the founders of the country? 8th, Buddhism came from India. Newton was even an Englishman. Didn't I see that you hate gravity? 9th, don't give birth. It seemed that all religions were like this, right? There was nothing to say. Let me give you a scientific explanation. Let's talk about these first. In fact, there are many things that are completely different from the truth. Lastly, it doesn't matter if you hate Buddhism. But if you vent your anger on me because of this matter, at least you have your own reasons. After writing so much, it's more than half a chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.